Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're headed to a place I've always found fascinating, the Netherlands. And wow, you've given me a ton of info. It's way more than just windmills and tulips, I gotta say.
It really is. This deep dive is going to show us a country that's, well, it's both rooted in its history, but also surprisingly cutting edge. Yeah, we'll see how they're grappling with climate change, how they're pushing boundaries in space tech. It's a really interesting mix of old and new.
Okay, so let's get into this. You
Yeah.
know, you know me, I love the quirky details.
Yeah.
Did you know that 25% of the Netherlands is actually below sea level? Like, how is that even
Well,
possible?
what I think is so fascinating about the Netherlands, they've like engineered a nation out of the sea, literally. We'll have to talk about those polders they've created. I mean,
Mhm.
imagine living in a place where you're constantly battling the elements like that?
And speaking of battling the elements, that coastline they've got on the North Sea, it's 451 kilometers long.
Okay.
It's no wonder flooding's a major concern there.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is, we think of the Netherlands as this totally flat country, but they actually have a volcanic side too, though not on the mainland.
Volcanoes in the Netherlands. Wait, that doesn't sound very Dutch, does it?
You're right, it's not on the mainland itself. See, the highest point in the Netherlands, it's actually Mount Scenery, and it's located on the Caribbean island of Saba. Saba, along with St. Eustatius, they're part of the Lesser Antilles volcanic arc. And get this, these islands are actually integral parts of the Netherlands. They became so back in 2010 after the dissolution of the Netherlands Antilles.
So the highest point isn't even in continental Netherlands. That's mind-blowing. It really shows how geographically diverse the Netherlands is, right? I mean, from lowlands to volcanic islands all in one nation. Okay, let's zoom in a bit. What about the people who live in this unique landscape?
Well, over 17 million people call the Netherlands home. That makes it a pretty densely populated country, especially when you consider its size.
Yeah, that's a lot of people packed into a relatively small space.
Right. And they're also dealing with an aging population. The median age there, it's 42.2 years. Low birth rate, but high life expectancy. It's definitely a demographic shift that has a bunch of implications for their future.
Yeah, this aging population thing, it's a trend we're seeing across a lot of developed nations these days. Makes you wonder how countries will need to adapt to these changing demographics.
Okay, so lots of people, small space, and they're getting older. What about the cultural makeup, though? Is it a pretty homogenous society?
Well, while the majority do identify as ethnically Dutch, around 25% come from other backgrounds. There are growing communities from other EU countries, and then significant populations who are Turkish, Moroccan, Surinamese, and Indonesian. So it's definitely multicultural.
And I bet that multiculturalism really adds to the vibrancy of the country. Absolutely. And that diversity also shows up in the languages they speak. You mentioned Frisian earlier, and you're right, it has a protected status, especially in the province of Friesland. And in the Caribbean Netherlands, things get even more diverse linguistically. You've got Papiamento and English being recognized on certain islands. It's fascinating how language can really reflect the history and, the evolution of a place.
It's like a linguistic tapestry, with each thread telling a different story. Now, we've talked about language, ethnicity, but what about religion? Does it play a big role in Dutch society these days?
Well, what's interesting is that religiosity is actually on the decline in the Netherlands. While there are still Catholic and Protestant communities, a majority of the population now identifies as unaffiliated with any religion.
That's something we're seeing in lots of parts of Europe, this shift away from traditional religious institutions. So if religion isn't a driving force, what shapes the values and daily life of the Dutch people?
Well, they're known for their enjoyment of life, let's say. There's a relatively high alcohol consumption rate, moderate tobacco use, and like many countries, they're also seeing a rise in obesity rates. Probably reflects global trends in diet and lifestyle.
Sounds like they enjoy their indulgences, but also face the same health challenges as many modern societies. So we've covered the people, from their geographic distribution to their cultural makeup and lifestyle trends. Now, no deep dive would be complete without looking at the political landscape. How do things work in the Netherlands politically? I've always been curious about that.
Right. So politically, the Netherlands is a constitutional monarchy with King Willem-Alexander as the head of state. But the real political power that rests with the parliament, or what they call the States General, it's a bicameral system, meaning they have a Senate and a House of Representatives.
And knowing the Dutch, I'm guessing their politics are pretty complex, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. They have a multi-party system, which means they often end up with coalition governments. So different parties need to work together to actually form a government. which can be a lot of negotiation and compromise.
I bet forming a stable government isn't always a walk in the park.
Exactly. And in fact, there's been quite a bit of political turmoil recently. Remember Mark Rutte? He was prime minister for quite a while. Well, his coalition collapsed just last year in 2023. And just this year, Dick Schoof was appointed as the new prime minister.
Wow, so things are constantly in flux in Dutch politics. What issues are at the forefront of their political discourse these days?
Well, their political landscape is really diverse right now. You've got parties like the VVD, which is the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, which leans center-right. But then you've also got, well, you've got the Farmer Citizen Movement, or BBB, and they're completely focused on agricultural interests. Shows the breadth of concerns and priorities within Dutch society.
Yeah, it's really interesting how a country's unique characteristics, like its strong agricultural sector, really shape their political dynamics. All right, so we've tackled geography, demographics, politics. So now let's talk about the Dutch economy.
The Netherlands has a highly developed economy, considered one of the high-income nations globally. They're strong in sectors like services, logistics, and high-tech industries. It's not just tulips anymore.
So what are their big exports these days?
They're major players in the global market. Their top trading partner is Germany, no surprise given their proximity and ties within the EU.
But I'd imagine even a strong economy like theirs faces its fair share of challenges, right?
Of course. Like many countries, they've been dealing with inflation recently, and they actually even went through a mild recession in 2023, mainly due to weak export demand. It's a reminder that even the most stable economies are affected by global forces.
That's a good point. But it sounds like they've got some pretty solid fundamentals economically.
They do. They've got a tight labor market, meaning lots of job opportunities, and they keep their deficits low. Plus, they've got strong credit ratings, so they're clearly pretty good at managing their finances.
So besides agriculture, what other industries are driving their economy?
Well, besides the strong agricultural sector, they excel in engineering, petroleum, and what's really interesting is their growing microelectronics industry.
Microelectronics, with high-tech stuff, seems like they're embracing innovation.
They are. And here's a telling detail. Revenue from forest resources is practically non-existent in the Netherlands.
That makes sense, given their population density and the limited land they have. Really emphasizes their focus on other industries, right? So we've covered their economic strengths, but what about the environment? How are they handling issues like climate change, with all the environmental concerns we have these days?
Well, air and water pollution are some big concerns in the Netherlands, mainly from industry and agriculture. Think heavy metals, organic compounds, nitrates, and phosphates in their waterways. And then vehicle emissions and activities from their oil refining industry are contributing to air pollution as well.
Those are tough issues to tackle for sure.
Yeah.
Are they taking any steps to kind of mitigate these environmental risks?
They are. They're really active in international efforts to address climate change and pollution. They've signed on to a number of environmental agreements, including the Paris Climate Agreement.
That's encouraging to hear. So how about land use in the Netherlands? Do they have a good balance between urban areas, agriculture, and natural areas?
Well, over 50% of their land is used for agriculture, leaves very little room for forest cover, really reflects how focused they are on food production and those dense urban areas, right?
It's impressive how they manage to feed their population on such limited agricultural land. They must be incredibly efficient.
They really are. Dutch agriculture is known for its efficiency and innovation. It's actually something they're recognized for globally. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the Netherlands' military and security.
That's not something I'd really thought about much, actually.
Mm.
Given their history and their position in Europe, what's their military like?
The Netherlands actually has an all-volunteer force. No mandatory military service. Technically, conscription is still in place, but it's been suspended since 1997.
So they've got a professional military then. Would you say they're a major player on the global stage when it comes to military power?
I wouldn't say they're a superpower, but they are a committed member of NATO. They've got strong ties with their European allies, particularly Germany and the UK.
Yeah, given their location and history, it makes sense to prioritize those alliances. Have they had any recent military deployments as part of NATO?
They have. They've contributed troops to NATO initiatives in Lithuania and Romania. This is part of the alliance's efforts to strengthen security in Eastern Europe. And here's an interesting tidbit. Women make up about 14% of their active personnel.
That's great to see. Shows a real commitment to gender equality within their military. Okay, so we've covered land and sea. Now let's shoot for the stars. What's the Netherlands doing in space exploration?
This is where it gets even more interesting. You wouldn't necessarily think of a country their size as a major space player, but they actually are. The Netherlands actively participates in the space sector, with a focus on research, technology, and using satellite data for all kinds of applications.
That's pretty impressive. Are they going it alone or collaborating with other nations?
They're a member of the European Space Agency, ESA. They contribute to a number of ESA projects, including the development of launch vehicles and astronaut training programs.
So they're really punching above their weight in the space
Mm.
arena, huh?
Yeah.
Are there any areas of space exploration they're particularly interested in?
Get this. Their research extends to exoplanets.
Exoplanets. You mean planets outside of our solar system?
Exactly. They're searching for planets beyond our solar system using some pretty sophisticated telescopes and data analysis techniques. It's really ambitious stuff.
That is incredible. To think that scientists from the Netherlands are searching for distant worlds really speaks volumes about their scientific curiosity.
It does. And it's not just about expanding our knowledge of the universe. It could help answer some big questions about life beyond Earth and where we fit into the grand scheme of things.
Wow, so the Netherlands is a nation with not just a rich history and a vibrant culture, but it's also a country with their sights set on the future. Speaking of global interconnectedness, how about transnational issues? What kind of challenges arise from their close ties to the rest of the world?
Two major challenges come to mind: refugee flows and drug trafficking. The Netherlands has taken in a significant number of refugees, especially from conflict zones like Syria and Eritrea, and more recently, Ukraine.
Yeah, it's a reminder that those global crises have ripple effects, and nations like the Netherlands often find themselves on the front lines of humanitarian efforts.
Right. And then on the other side, there's the issue of drug trafficking. The Netherlands, unfortunately, serves as a major transit point for illicit drugs, cocaine from South and Central America, and methamphetamine from Mexico. It's a complex problem, no easy solutions.
It really highlights the challenges that come with globalization, even for a well-developed and prosperous country like the Netherlands. Shows they're not immune to the darker side of global interconnectedness.
Exactly. These are challenges that really require international cooperation and some innovative approaches if we want to find solutions. The Netherlands is a country constantly adapting and evolving.
This has been an incredibly informative look at the Netherlands. We've covered their unique geography, the culture, their political system, economic strengths, and even their space program. It's clear that the Netherlands is a nation of contrasts, balancing tradition and innovation, grappling with those local and global challenges, and I'm sure there's still so much more to uncover.
Absolutely. In part 2 of our deep dive, we'll delve a bit deeper into some of the specific challenges and opportunities facing the Netherlands, everything from adapting to climate change to their role in the global economy. We'll also explore some of the cultural and societal nuances that really make the Netherlands so fascinating.
Can't wait to dig in deeper. Stay tuned for part 2 of our Netherlands deep dive, where we'll uncover even more about this intriguing nation. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Netherlands. In part 1, we covered a lot of ground: geography, demographics, politics. Now I want to dig a little deeper into some of the more nuanced aspects of Dutch life.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, we touched on those transnational issues, specifically the Netherlands being a transit point for drug trafficking. It's more than just drugs passing through. The Netherlands actually has like a really unique relationship with drugs and how they're handled.
Right. I'd heard about their more tolerant approach to certain drugs. Doesn't that cause a lot of debate?
It does. The Netherlands has this policy of tolerance towards cannabis. They've got these licensed coffee shops that can sell small amounts. It's definitely a controversial approach, to say the least. Supporters argue it reduces harm, while opponents worry about the potential negative consequences, obviously.
It's a great example of how the Netherlands takes this kind of, an unconventional approach to complex social issues. Makes you rethink the typical assumptions we have about drug policy. Now, let's move on to another global challenge: climate change. We talked about how much of the Netherlands is below sea level, which makes them super vulnerable to those rising sea levels. So how are they dealing with this threat?
That's where the Dutch story becomes even more fascinating. See, they're not just accepting their fate. They're taking this really proactive and innovative approach to climate change adaptation.
So they're not just building higher dikes. What else are they doing?
Flood defenses are still crucial, but they're thinking so much bigger than that. They're developing floating houses and even, get this, entire floating cities. Imagine that. They're also experimenting with water-resistant architecture and exploring ways to, well, to make room for the river. So they're allowing controlled flooding in certain areas to take the pressure off of other places.
Like they're working with the water instead of just trying to fight against it. That's so smart.
Exactly. They're turning this immense challenge into this opportunity for innovation and sustainable development. I think it's really inspiring, actually.
It's like they're taking a problem and using it as a source of creativity. We definitely need more of that kind of thinking. Okay, back in part one, we briefly touched on the Netherlands' commercial space sector. I'm curious to hear more about that. How are they making a name for themselves in the space industry?
Well, they might not be launching rockets into space, but they are making some pretty significant contributions in other ways. The Netherlands has this thriving space technology sector. They specialize in areas like satellite development, Earth observation, and even astrophysics research.
So they're focusing on the brains behind the space race, not just the brawn. That's really neat.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And they're really good at it. They've got some cutting-edge companies there developing space technologies, and their scientists are involved in some groundbreaking research.
Can you give us like some specific examples of these companies or the innovations they're working on?
Absolutely. A big one is Airbus Defence and Space Netherlands. It's a subsidiary of Airbus, that European aerospace giant. They specialize in the development and construction of satellites, including those used for Earth observation and telecommunications.
So they're literally helping us see the Earth from a whole new perspective.
Yeah.
What about the Dutch scientists you mentioned? What kind of research are they involved in?
Well, remember we talked about their focus on exoplanets? They're really heavily involved in the search for planets outside our solar system, using advanced telescopes and data analysis techniques. Pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It really is. It's crazy to think that scientists from the Netherlands are like actually searching for distant worlds. It just shows you their ambition. It doesn't really have any bounds.
Exactly. And it's not just about satisfying curiosity, This research could answer some really fundamental questions about our place in the universe and the possibility of life on other planets.
It goes to show that the Netherlands is not only a nation with a rich history and a vibrant culture, but it's also a country with its sights set on the future. They're tackling these real world problems while also exploring the mysteries of the universe. It's incredible.
It's this unique blend of pragmatism and vision that I think makes the Netherlands so fascinating. They're a country of contrasts, always striving to find that balance.
It feels like we've only just like scratched the surface. What other hidden gems might we discover as we keep exploring?
Well, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll delve into the heart of Dutch culture and society. We'll explore their art, their literature, and their unique approach to social issues, everything from healthcare to education.
I can't wait to uncover even more about this remarkable nation. Stay tuned for part 3 of our Netherlands deep dive, where we'll really discover what makes the Dutch tick. Welcome back to the final part of our Netherlands deep dive. We've explored their geography, politics, economy, even their space program, But what really brings a place to life is its culture, its people. So let's uncover that side of the Netherlands, shall we? What would you say defines the Dutch character, their art, their way of life?
Well, the Dutch have this cultural history that's both rich and really influential. Just think about the Dutch Golden Age, masters like Rembrandt and Vermeer. Their paintings, they captured everyday life, but with this incredible detail and emotion. And then you've got Van Gogh, completely different style, with his bold colors and those expressive brushstrokes, but equally powerful.
It's amazing, isn't it, how those Dutch artists have left such a lasting impact on the world. I mean, their work still speaks to people even centuries later.
Absolutely. And it's not just visual arts either. Literature plays a huge role in Dutch culture. Think of Anne Frank's diary. It's a testament to the human spirit, in the face of just unimaginable adversity. It still moves people today. And in the world of children's literature, you've got Dick Bruna's Miffy the Bunny, captivating those young minds with simplicity and charm.
It's fascinating how this relatively small country has had such a profound impact on world culture.
Yeah.
So we've talked about their artistic contributions, but how about their approach to social issues? I mean, we talked about their unique drug policy, but what other areas stand out to you?
The Dutch are known for for their pragmatic and often their progressive approach to social issues. Take their healthcare system, for example. They have universal healthcare. Everyone has access to quality medical care, regardless of their income or social status.
Yeah, that's a huge contrast to the system here in the U.S. Healthcare can be such a source of stress, a financial burden for so many people. It really highlights the different values placed on social welfare, I guess.
Exactly. The Dutch really prioritize social well-being. They believe that access to healthcare is a fundamental right. And their approach to education it's also really impressive. They place a strong emphasis on early childhood education, and they have an excellent vocational training system. They're making sure people have the skills they need for a wide range of careers.
So they're investing in their people from a young age, equipping them to succeed both personally and professionally. It sounds like a really holistic approach to creating a thriving society.
It really is. And this approach, I think, is reflected in so many aspects of Dutch life, from their strong environmental awareness to their commitment to social justice. They're constantly striving for that balance between tradition and modernity, individual freedom and collective responsibility, economic growth and environmental sustainability.
It seems like they're really dedicated to building a society that works for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And while they certainly face their share of challenges, I think their willingness to experiment, to think outside the box, and to really put their citizens' well-being first, it's truly admirable.
This deep dive into the Netherlands it's been truly eye-opening. I have to say, we've covered so much ground, but I still feel like we've only scratched the surface.
And I think that's the beauty of it, right? There's always more to learn, more perspectives to consider. This deep dive, well, hopefully it's given you a good foundation for understanding the Netherlands, but it's really just a starting point.
It definitely has for me. I feel like this has really ignited a desire to learn even more, maybe even experience the Netherlands firsthand someday.
And that's what we hope for with every deep dive, to inspire our listeners to keep exploring, to dig deeper, ask those questions, and really appreciate the complexity and the wonder of the world around us.
Beautifully said. A huge thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the Netherlands. We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration, so stay tuned. All right, so you've given us quite the stack of stuff about the Netherlands. I see articles, history, even some modern political things going on.
Yeah.
You really want to get under the hood of this place, don't you? It's more than just windmills and tulips, right?
It certainly is. I think we often have this image of the Netherlands as this sort of quaint little country, but there's this incredible story of resilience and innovation woven through their entire history.
Yeah.
And you want to know what makes them such a powerhouse? Well, let's start with the fact that they practically built the country themselves.
Wait, what do you mean built it?
Well, the name Netherlands actually literally translates to lower countries. And for good reason. A full 26% of the country sits below sea level.
Whoa.
They've been wresting land from the water for centuries, creating polders, which are basically these patches of land reclaimed from the sea.
Hey, hold on. 26% is underwater.
Yeah.
That's like a quarter of the country. How do they even live like that?
It's really a testament to their engineering. I mean, they've got this intricate system of dikes, canals, and pumping stations all working tirelessly to keep the water at bay.
Wow.
Imagine the sheer will and ingenuity it took to not just survive, but to thrive in such a challenging environment.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, with rising sea levels and climate change, are they constantly on edge?
Absolutely. I mean, they're living with this awareness that their very existence is tied to their ability to manage the water.
Right.
And that's why they've developed projects like the Delta Works, this massive system of dams and storm surge barriers.
Oh, wow.
It's actually considered one of the 7 wonders of the modern world.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking some serious engineering feats here. It makes you think this constant battle against the sea must have really shaped their character in a big way.
Oh, without a doubt. You see that resilience reflected throughout their history. Even the Romans found them to be a tough nut to crack. Julius Caesar himself actually commented on the ferocity of the tribes living in the southern Netherlands.
Oh, wow. And then there's that whole 80 Years' War, right, where
Yeah.
they fought for independence from Spain. I mean, they don't back down easy, do they?
Exactly. This wasn't just a war, it was a brutal struggle for survival.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. They were up against one of the most powerful empires in the world at the time,
Right.
and they fought tooth and nail for 80 years until they won their freedom.
80 years.
That level of grit, it's woven into their DNA.
There's this thing I read that really stuck with me. It was this quote about Dutch citizens biting into the heart of a Spanish soldier during battle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's intense.
It really is. That image, I think, really encapsulates the sheer desperation and determination that fueled that conflict.
Yeah.
It really speaks volumes about what they were willing to endure to secure their independence.
Yeah, it's amazing how they went from this hard-fought independence to becoming this global superpower in what seems like the blink of an eye.
Right?
The Dutch Golden Age. It's almost like a historical anomaly.
Yeah. They go from barely surviving to like leading the world in trade exploration and innovation.
And this is where things get really fascinating because their success wasn't just about luck. It was a direct result of their ingenuity and adaptability.
Huh.
Take their geography, for example. They were basically stuck between these powerful empires, so they had to get creative.
Oh.
And that's how they ended up dominating sea trade, establishing the Dutch East India Company, creating colonies all over the world.
They were importing spices from Indonesia, silks from India, all while developing financial systems that would change the world. The world's first stock exchange. That was them. It's incredible.
What's interesting is that their innovations weren't without their downsides.
Oh.
That same drive for financial success also led to tulip mania, which is considered the first asset bubble in history.
Oh, wow.
So it's a reminder that even brilliant ideas can have unintended consequences.
So we've got this incredible story of a nation literally pulling itself out of the water, fighting for its freedom, and then becoming a global powerhouse through sheer innovation.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's more to it than that. What about their culture?
Their culture is just as intriguing as their history.
Yeah?
The popular image of windmills and tulips while charming only scratches the surface. You gotta dig deeper to understand what truly makes them tick.
So what lies beneath the surface? What are the core values that really define the Dutch people?
Their culture is deeply rooted in pragmatism, resilience, and a remarkable level of social tolerance.
Wow.
It's not just a coincidence that they were the first country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage.
Wow.
They've got this unique ability to approach complex social issues with a sense of practicality and openness.
So they're not afraid to challenge the status quo when it comes to social issues? I'm guessing this comes from their history of having to adapt and find solutions to such unique challenges.
Precisely. They've had to be practical and resourceful to survive, and that mindset really extends to their social policies. They developed this system called pillarization, which allowed different religious and social groups to coexist within their own spheres.
Huh.
It's a complex system, but it speaks to their ability to find ways to accommodate such diverse perspectives and beliefs.
It sounds like the Netherlands is this place where tradition and modernity really collide.
Yeah.
Where you've got cutting-edge design studios right next to centuries-old cheese markets. But looking at the sources you provided, it seems like this tradition of tolerance is being put to the test in the 21st century.
That's right. While they have this reputation for being progressive, there's been this noticeable political shift in recent years with the rise of the right-wing Populist Party for Freedom. And that raises some big questions about the future of their historically open society.
So how did this happen? How did a country known for its tolerance experience this surge in populism?
That's a complex question, and to answer it, we need to understand the anxieties and uncertainties that have been brewing beneath the surface of Dutch society.
All right, let's dive into that. What are the factors that have contributed to this political shift? And what does it mean for the future of the Netherlands?
To understand that, we have to go back a bit further and examine the impact of globalization, immigration, and the rapid pace of social change on Dutch society. That's where we'll find some of the answers.
So we left off talking about this rise in populism in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
It seems like a bit of a paradox, right?
Yeah.
This country with all these like progressive values is now grappling with a political movement that often feels, well, the opposite.
It definitely is a complex situation.
Yeah.
And it really highlights how even societies that are known for their tolerance can experience these shifts, especially in the face of like rapid global change.
You mentioned globalization, immigration, the social change.
Yeah.
I mean, those are pretty big forces.
Right.
How have they specifically impacted the Netherlands?
Well, globalization, for all of its benefits, can also lead to a sense of unease for some people.
Right.
But it's brought about economic shifts, increased competition, and just like a sense that things are changing too quickly, you know?
So some people feel like they're being left behind.
Yeah.
Like the world is changing around them and they're losing their sense of place.
Exactly. And in the Netherlands, immigration has become a focal point for those anxieties.
Oh.
The country has always been relatively open to immigration, but in recent years, there's been a growing concern about the pace and scale of immigration, particularly from Muslim-majority countries.
And this is where the Party for Freedom comes in.
Right. Geert Wilders, the party leader, has really tapped into these anxieties, framing immigration as a threat to Dutch culture and identity.
Okay.
He's particularly focused on Islam, using rhetoric that's often inflammatory and divisive.
I'm guessing this message resonates with people who feel like their voices aren't being heard, like the traditional political establishment isn't addressing their concerns.
That's a big part of it. Populist movements often thrive on this sense of disillusionment and frustration with the status quo.
Yeah.
They offer these simple, often simplistic solutions to complex problems.
Mm.
And that appeals to people who feel like the system is rigged against them.
So what does this mean for the future of the Netherlands?
Yeah.
This tension between their historically tolerant society and this rise in populism, it feels like they're at a crossroads.
They are. And this tension isn't just playing out in the political sphere, it's also impacting their economic policies. Remember we were talking about those earthquakes caused by natural gas extraction?
Yeah, that's something I never would have expected to hear about in the Netherlands, earthquakes.
It's been a major issue for them. Decades of extracting natural gas from the Groningen field, one of the largest in the world,
Wow.
has led to ground destabilization and significant damage to homes and buildings.
So they're facing this dilemma. Natural gas has been a huge source of revenue for them, but now they're having to grapple with the environmental and social consequences.
Right. And phasing out gas production isn't a simple task. It has major economic implications, especially for a country that's relied on this industry for so long.
Yeah.
They're having to balance the need for economic stability with the urgency of addressing climate change and protecting their citizens from further harm.
It seems like they're being pulled in multiple directions. Dealing with the rise in populism, figuring out how to transition away from natural gas, and then facing the ever-present threat of climate change.
Right.
Which, as we've discussed, is especially worrying for a country that's essentially built on reclaimed land.
It's a lot to juggle.
It certainly is, and it's all happening against this backdrop of increasing global instability and uncertainty. The decisions they make in the coming years will have a ripple effect far beyond their borders.
It makes you wonder, can the Dutch model of tolerance and pragmatism survive these challenges? Or will they be forced to adapt in ways that fundamentally change their society?
That's the big question, isn't it? Can they hold on to their core values while navigating this complex and rapidly changing world? It's a question with global implications because, in many ways, the Netherlands is a microcosm of the challenges that many nations are facing today. So what can we learn from the Dutch experience? What insights can we glean from their history and their current struggles that might be relevant to other countries?
I think their story offers some valuable lessons about the importance of adaptability, the need for sustainable solutions, and the delicate balance between individual anxieties and collective responsibility.
Yeah.
But to really unpack those lessons, we need to dig a little deeper into the Dutch psyche.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
What are the key cultural and historical factors that have shaped their approach to problem solving?
Okay.
How have they managed to thrive, despite facing these seemingly insurmountable obstacles time and time again?
To understand that, we have to look beyond the stereotypes and really delve into the heart of what makes them tick. They're a unique blend of practicality, innovation, and this deep-seated belief in their ability to shape their own destiny.
So we've been talking about how the Netherlands is facing all these significant challenges, and it makes you wonder, how are they going to approach this stuff?
Yeah.
What can we learn from their unique perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You have this country that's literally built itself from the ground up, constantly adapting to this environment.
Right.
They've never been afraid to experiment, to think outside the box. It's almost like their history has instilled in them a certain level of fearlessness, when it comes to tackling complex problems.
So are you saying that this can-do attitude was going to be like their secret weapon in facing all these modern-day challenges?
It could be a key factor. We've seen how this pragmatism and innovation has played out in their history, from their incredible water management systems to their pioneering social policies.
Right.
Take their approach to drug policy, for example.
Okay.
Rather than just simply criminalizing drug use, they've adopted this harm reduction approach focusing on public health and safety.
Yeah, I've heard about that. It's a very different approach than what we see in a lot of other countries.
Right.
It seems like they're willing to question conventional wisdom and find solutions that work for their specific context.
Exactly. They're not afraid to go against the grain to try something new if they think it might lead to a better outcome. And this willingness to experiment, to learn from their mistakes, it's a big part of their success story.
It's inspiring to see a country that's not afraid to kind of challenge the status quo.
Hmm.
But let's be realistic here. They're also facing some pretty deep-seated anxieties, particularly around immigration cultural change. So how do they reconcile this openness to new ideas with the concerns of those who feel threatened by these changes?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that a lot of societies are grappling with right now. Can they find a way to balance these individual anxieties with this sense of collective responsibility
Right.
to create a society that's both inclusive and secure? It's a delicate balancing act.
You've mentioned that the Dutch are known for their consensus-building approach to politics. Do you think that'll play a role in how they navigate these tensions?
Absolutely. Their political system is designed to encourage dialogue and compromise. They've got this long history of working together to find solutions that benefit the majority.
Huh.
It's not about one side winning over the other. It's about finding common ground.
It's fascinating how their history of having to literally work together to keep the water at bay might have influenced their political culture. It's like they've learned that cooperation is essential for survival.
That's a great point. Their geography has undoubtedly shaped their worldview. I mean, they understand that they're all in this together, that they have to rely on each other to overcome these challenges.
So, knowing what we now know about Dutch history, their culture of innovation, their approach to problem solving, what do you think their role on the global stage should be in the 21st century?
I think they have the potential to be a leader in finding solutions to some of the most pressing issues that we're facing.
Yeah.
Climate change, social inequality, political polarization. I mean, they've demonstrated this capacity for creative problem solving, for thinking long term, for building consensus.
It's like their whole history has been a case study in adaptability and resilience. I mean, they literally built a country out of the sea.
Exactly. And that spirit of innovation and determination is something that the world needs right now. They may be a small country, but they have the potential to make a really big impact.
You've given us a lot to think about. From reclaiming land from the sea to pioneering these social policies, the Netherlands has consistently punched above its weight. It's a country that's full of surprises, and it's clear that their story is far from over.
Their journey offers this powerful reminder that even in the face of these seemingly insurmountable challenges, human ingenuity and this willingness to adapt can make all the difference.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Netherlands, here's a final thought for you to ponder. What can we learn from the Dutch experience? How can we apply their spirit of innovation and resilience to the challenges that we face in our own lives and in our own communities?
It's a question worth considering. Perhaps by studying their successes and their struggles, we can find inspiration and guidance as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century. Welcome to our deep dive into the Netherlands. You guys have sent in some really fascinating articles, and I gotta say, I'm already learning a ton.
Cool.
We're going to explore its history and geography,
Okay.
culture,
Right.
and even tackle this question: is it Netherlands or Holland?
Right.
Get ready for some surprising facts along the way.
I'm ready.
We'll even uncover some
Oh, yeah.
pretty dark historical moments,
Oh.
like a war so brutal it resulted in cannibalism.
Oh, wow.
So,
Ew.
yeah,
Yeah. Just started with the
Yeah.
confusion between Netherlands and Holland.
right.
That's really interesting, isn't it? It's a
Yeah.
great example of how
It is.
names
Yeah.
carry so much weight.
Absolutely. I mean,
Frequency.
Netherlands literally translates to lower countries,
Right.
which makes sense geographically.
Yeah.
But using Holland to refer to the whole country, it's a bit like calling Scotland England.
Right.
It's just not accurate.
Yeah.
And it can rub people the wrong way.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to acknowledge that distinction.
Yeah.
Holland only refers to 2 of the 12 provinces,
So, wow.
North and South Holland.
Okay.
You could imagine how someone from, say,
Yeah.
Friesland might feel
Yeah.
about their identity being lumped in
Yeah.
with just Holland.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that diversity within the country,
Yeah.
not oversimplifying things.
Don't oversimplify it.
But here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Low Countries is actually the formal name for the Netherlands
Huh.
in many other languages.
Okay.
Almost a bit ironic considering they've managed to thrive
He's kind of ironic.
despite being largely below sea level.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and The term Holland itself is sometimes used
Oh, real?
in a derogatory way by the Flemish
Uh-huh.
or Southern Dutch to refer to those from the north.
Okay.
So clearly there's some historical and cultural tensions there
Yeah.
that we need to explore.
Sure.
Even the word Dutch
Yeah.
has an interesting story.
Okay.
It originally referred to all speakers of West Germanic languages,
Uh-huh.
but over time, its meaning narrowed to become associated specifically
Okay.
with people from the Netherlands.
Wow. I never knew that.
Yeah.
It's like language itself reflects the shifting power dynamics and
Right.
relationships between different groups over time.
Exactly.
But let's go back even further
Okay.
to the very beginnings of the Netherlands.
Right.
Did you know their story starts long before the Romans,
Oh, wow.
with traces of Neanderthals dating back over 250,000 years?
Really?
They even found the world's oldest canoe in the Netherlands.
I did not know that.
It's called the Pesse canoe,
Okay.
discovered in the province of Drenthe.
Mhm.
It's estimated to be around 8,000 years old.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's amazing to think about those early inhabitants
Yeah.
navigating the waterways
Right.
that would become so central to Dutch identity.
Totally.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? From Neanderthals paddling canoes to a global economic powerhouse.
I know, right?
Talk about a transformation.
That's quite a jump.
So
Yeah.
what happened after the Neanderthals?
Okay, so after that, you had a variety of cultures,
Okay.
like the Swifter Bant
Huh?
and Funnel Beaker people.
Yeah.
They even built those impressive dolmens you see
Oh, yeah.
dotted around the countryside.
Yeah.
Those large stone grave monuments.
Right.
Then came the Celts
Hmm.
and various Germanic tribes,
Okay.
including the Frisians,
Right.
who put up quite a fight against the Romans.
Those Frisians sound like they had a similar independent spirit
Oh,
to the Dutch today,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Resisting Roman rule, it seems like a recurring theme
It is.
throughout their history.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But the Romans did eventually conquer the region,
Right.
and their influence had a lasting impact,
Okay.
particularly in the south.
Yeah.
The Franks adopted Latin,
Mm-hmm.
which laid the groundwork for the separate development.
Wow. Dutch and French.
It's amazing how geographical and political boundaries
Right.
often shape the evolution of languages.
They really do. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And those early centuries
Yeah,
were a whirlwind of shifting territories and power struggles.
for sure.
The Frisian kingdom emerged only to fall apart later.
Mm-hmm.
The County of Holland rose to prominence,
Uh-huh.
engaging in those oddly named hook and cod wars.
Right. Those names.
It's like a medieval soap opera unfolding.
It does. It really does. And then you have the Burgundian
Yeah.
and Habsburg rule,
Right.
which ultimately led to the 80 Years' War,
Okay.
a period of intense conflict and upheaval.
Right.
This is where we encounter those darker chapters you mentioned earlier.
Okay, here's where it gets really intense.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this war.
I'll
and
write
what
it.
the cannibalism.
The 80 Years' War was a brutal affair
Uh-huh.
with shocking levels of violence on both sides.
There are historical accounts of Spanish soldiers engaging in cannibalism
Oh my God.
after the siege of Leiden in 1574.
It's hard to reconcile that image
I know.
with the peaceful and tolerant Netherlands we know today.
Right.
But I guess it just goes to show that every nation has its share
Yeah,
of darkness and complexity in its past.
that's true.
It makes their present even more remarkable, don't you think?
It really does. And out of that darkness came defining moments.
Okay.
Take the sack of Antwerp in 1576,
Mm-hmm.
a devastating event that ultimately spurred the northern provinces
Right.
to unite against Spanish rule.
Wow.
This led to the Union of Utrecht in 1581,
Okay.
which is often seen as the foundation of the modern Netherlands.
So out of this brutal conflict,
Yeah.
they found a way to forge a new path towards independence.
Exactly.
It's another example of their resilience, their
Mhm.
ability to adapt and overcome adversity.
Yeah,
It seems like a recurring theme we'll be seeing a lot of, right?
you're absolutely right. That spirit of resilience and adaptability
Okay.
is woven into the very fabric of Dutch history and identity.
Wow.
It's what allowed them to not only survive, but thrive,
Yeah.
even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges.
It's incredible to think that from those turbulent beginnings, the Dutch Republic emerged and went on to experience its golden age.
Right.
A tiny nation,
Yeah.
barely free from Spanish rule, becoming a global superpower.
It's great.
It's a truly remarkable story, wouldn't you say?
It is remarkable. And to understand how they achieved such a feat,
Yeah.
you have to look at their unique approach.
Okay.
Unlike other European powers at the time,
Mm-hmm.
The Dutch Republic wasn't a centralized monarchy.
Oh,
Each of the 7 provinces had a significant degree of autonomy.
so instead of a top-down, rigid system,
Right.
it was more like a collaboration between different regions,
Yeah.
each with its own strength.
Exactly. This
Yeah.
decentralized structure
Wow.
fostered innovation and entrepreneurship.
Mm.
It allowed them to capitalize on their geographical advantage,
Mm-hmm.
being situated at the crossroads of major European trade routes.
So it wasn't just about being low,
Right.
but also about being strategically positioned.
Exactly.
They turned their geographical location into a major asset.
Mm.
And they had those intricate networks of rivers and canals
Right.
to facilitate trade and transportation.
Precisely. They had a natural advantage
Yeah.
that they exploited brilliantly.
Hey, it wasn't just about trading within Europe.
No,
The Dutch East India Company and the Dutch West India Company were established,
that's right.
extending their influence across the globe.
Mm.
Think spices, silks, porcelain.
Yeah, all of it.
They were trading it all
Mhm.
from New Amsterdam in North America
Wow.
to the Cape Colony in South Africa
Mhm.
and the Dutch East Indies in Asia.
It's incredible.
It's almost mind-boggling how much they achieved
Yeah.
on a global scale, considering they were such a small nation. But their golden age wasn't just about economic dominance, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
It was also a period of incredible artistic and scientific flourishing.
Absolutely. This was the time of Rembrandt,
Right.
Vermeer,
Mhm.
and other Dutch masters who left an enduring legacy on the art world.
Yeah.
Scientific discoveries were flourishing,
Wow.
and the Netherlands became a haven for free thinkers and intellectuals.
Interesting.
In fact, they're often considered the first truly capitalist country,
Oh, wow.
with innovations like the stock exchange originating there.
But it wasn't all tulips and windmills, right?
Well,
Even during this golden age, there were challenges.
of course.
Didn't the infamous tulip mania happen during this period?
It did. Tulip mania
Yeah.
is a classic example of a speculative bubble.
Right.
People were buying and selling tulip bulbs at exorbitant prices,
Really?
driven by a frenzy that ultimately led to a crash.
Oh, wow.
It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of market speculation,
Yeah.
something that resonates even today.
Yeah, for sure. It's a reminder that even in times of great prosperity,
Yeah,
things can go awry.
they can.
And the Netherlands faced even bigger challenges than tulip bulbs.
Right.
There was the ramp jar, the disaster year of 1672, when they were attacked by France, England, and several German states simultaneously.
That's right. The ramp jar
Wow.
was a defining moment,
Yeah.
a true test of their resilience.
Wow.
They even resorted to flooding parts of the country
Oh,
to halt the enemy's advance.
talk about a commitment to defending your homeland.
I know, right?
It's incredible how they managed to withstand those attacks.
Yeah.
But the conflict didn't end there, did it?
No.
There was also the 40 Years' War with France,
Right.
which must have had a significant impact on their economy and naval power.
It did.
Wow.
The 40 Years' War, though not a continuous conflict, drained resources and weakened the Dutch Republic's position
Right.
as a leading global power.
Okay.
This period of prolonged warfare may even be connected to their present-day stance of neutrality in
Interesting.
international affairs,
Okay.
a legacy of seeking to avoid entanglement in major conflicts.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah,
Their history seems to inform their present in so many ways.
it does.
But even as they faced these challenges, they also had to confront the darker side of their colonial past,
Right.
the Dutch East India Company.
Mm-hmm.
While instrumental in their economic success, was
Yeah.
also deeply involved in the slave trade
Yes.
and the exploitation of their colonies.
Absolutely. The cultivation system, implemented in the Dutch East Indies, for
Right, yeah.
instance,
Yeah.
forced farmers to devote a portion of their land
Wow.
to cash crops for export, like coffee and sugar.
Right.
This enriched the Dutch,
Yeah.
but perpetuated a system of oppression and exploitation.
It's a sobering reminder that even during periods of great achievement,
Yeah.
there are often shadows lurking beneath the surface.
There.
The abolition of slavery in 1863 was a long overdue step,
Mhm.
but the legacy of colonialism continues to be felt today.
Indeed. And it's important to acknowledge that complexity
Right.
when studying their history.
Yeah.
But through it all,
Mm-hmm.
the Netherlands has shown an incredible capacity for adaptation and reinvention.
Wow.
They navigated a series of political transformations,
Okay.
from the Batavian Republic
Mm.
to the Napoleonic Kingdom of Holland
All right.
and the eventual restoration of a monarchy.
They lost Belgium in 1830, faced the horrors of World War II,
Right.
and went through the complex process of decolonization. It's almost dizzying,
Is a lot.
the amount of change they've experienced.
Right.
But they seem to have come out of it all as a strong, vibrant nation.
Yeah, they have.
They played a key role in the formation of the European Union and have been consistently ranked high
That's right.
in global democracy indices.
Exactly. They even dissolved the Netherlands Antilles in 2010, with some islands choosing to become special municipalities
Okay.
within the Netherlands.
That's interesting.
This shows their willingness to adapt and evolve their political structures
Yeah.
to meet the needs of their people.
It's a testament to their resilience and their ability to learn from their past.
Absolutely.
But let's not forget about the ever-present challenge that has shaped their destiny
Yeah.
from the very beginning: water.
Of course, water.
We talked about those early inhabitants navigating the waterways,
Right.
and now, centuries later,
Yeah.
the Netherlands is still wrestling with the very element that defines it.
You're right. Water is both the lifeblood of the Netherlands and its greatest challenge.
Yeah.
They've been incredibly innovative in reclaiming land from the sea,
Right.
creating those iconic polders.
Right.
Imagine taking a bathtub
Huh.
and slowly draining it,
Uh-huh.
revealing the land underneath.
Yeah.
That's essentially how polders are created.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It really helps to visualize the process. Yeah.
But as we know, living below sea level comes with risks.
Right.
The devastating North Sea flood of 1953,
Yeah.
which claimed over 1,800 lives,
Mm-hmm.
must have been a turning point in their approach to water management.
It was a wake-up call,
Yeah.
a stark reminder of nature's power.
Wow.
And the way they responded is truly inspiring.
Okay.
They embarked on one of the most ambitious engineering projects in history,
Wow.
the Delta Works.
Okay.
It's a complex system of dams, sluices, storm surge barriers, and dikes,
Mhm.
all designed to protect the country from the relentless North Sea.
So it's like a gigantic web of defenses against the water,
Yeah.
constantly evolving and adapting to new challenges.
Exactly. And it's not just a technical feat,
Right.
it's a symbol of the Dutch spirit,
Okay.
their determination to not just survive, but thrive,
Yeah.
even when facing seemingly insurmountable odds.
It's inspiring, isn't it?
It is.
Their approach to water management could offer valuable lessons.
Right. For other countries grappling with the effects of climate change and rising sea levels.
Oh, sure.
But their innovative spirit isn't limited to engineering. They've also been pioneers in social policy,
Yeah,
often pushing boundaries and challenging conventional norms.
absolutely. Their political system,
Yeah.
a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary democracy,
Uh-huh.
is characterized by consensus building
Mm-hmm.
and a strong emphasis on social justice.
Wow.
They consistently rank high in global democracy indices,
That's awful.
reflecting their commitment to creating a fair and inclusive society.
And we can't forget about their pioneering policies on issues like drug legalization and euthanasia. They seem to have a very pragmatic and tolerant approach to social issues.
They do, and it's rooted in their history.
Okay.
The concept of pillarization, for instance, which emerged in the 19th century,
Okay.
encouraged different religious and social groups to live alongside each other peacefully,
Right.
each with their own institutions and organizations.
Right.
It's one of the factors
Yeah.
that has contributed to their long-standing tradition of tolerance and acceptance.
We've talked about their political and social innovations, but we can't forget one of the most iconic symbols of Dutch culture,
Right.
the bicycle.
Oh, yeah.
They practically invented cycling culture, haven't they?
It's true. The Netherlands has more bicycles than people,
Wow.
and their cycling infrastructure is world-renowned.
Yeah.
It's a testament to their commitment to sustainability
Right.
and a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. It's amazing how they've managed to integrate cycling so seamlessly into their daily lives.
Incredible.
I've heard stories of people cycling in suits and dresses,
yeah.
even carrying groceries on their bikes.
Absolutely. Cycling is just a way of life there.
Yeah.
But their cultural richness extends far beyond bicycles.
Right.
They have a vibrant art scene,
Yeah.
from those Golden Age painters we discussed earlier to modern-day electronic dance music. And of course, they're known for their directness, their practicality,
Yeah.
and their dry sense of humor.
Okay.
Did you know they're also the tallest people in the world?
Wait, seriously?
Yeah,
The tallest?
the tallest.
I had no idea.
It's true. The average Dutchman is over 6 feet tall.
Wow.
Maybe it's all that cycling and fresh air.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
It's remarkable how they've managed to create such a successful and progressive society
Yeah.
while preserving their unique cultural identity.
It's really cool.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I have to ask,
Okay.
what about Dutch cuisine?
Uh-huh.
Is there more to it than just cheese and tulips?
There's definitely more to Dutch cuisine than meets the eye.
Okay.
While it might not be as internationally famous as, say,
Right.
French or Italian cuisine,
Yeah.
it has its own unique charm and regional variations.
Okay.
Think hearty stews,
Hmm.
fresh seafood,
Okay.
and pastries that will make your mouth water.
Oh.
And yes, dairy products do play a big role.
Okay, so we can't escape the cheese.
You can't escape the cheese.
But tell me more about these regional variations.
Sorry.
What are some must-try dishes if you find yourself in the Netherlands?
Well, a classic Dutch cheese board is always a good starting point.
Okay.
You'll find a variety of textures and flavors,
Yeah.
from Gouda to Edam to Leyden.
Right.
And if you're feeling adventurous,
Okay.
try some Rookwurst,
Rookwurst.
a smoked sausage often served with sauerkraut or mashed potatoes.
Rookwurst. I'm adding that to my list. What about those pastries you mentioned?
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah.
Vlaai is a delicious pie-like pastry with various fillings,
Okay.
popular in the southern region.
Okay.
And of course, no trip to the Netherlands is complete without trying a stroopwafel.
Stroopwafels.
Yes,
Now you're speaking my language.
those thin, crispy waffle cookies filled with gooey caramel.
But beyond the food,
Mm-hmm.
what really stands out to me is the Dutch approach to life.
Yeah.
Their pragmatism, their resilience, and their commitment to making the world a better place.
I completely agree. Whether it's engineering marvels to hold back the sea
Yeah.
or pioneering social policies that challenge the status quo,
Right.
the Netherlands is a country that constantly strives to find solutions.
Mm-mm.
They're a nation that embraces change,
Yeah.
values diversity,
Mm-hmm.
and never stops innovating.
It's inspiring to see how they've turned challenges into opportunities time and time again.
It really is.
They've shown that even a small country can make a big impact on the world.
That's right.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Netherlands.
Great deep dive.
I have to say I've learned so much.
Awesome.
It's a country with a rich tapestry of history, culture, and innovation.
And we've only scratched the surface.
I know, right?
Hopefully this deep dive has piqued your curiosity and inspired you to explore further.
I think it's safe to say that the Netherlands is much more than just windmills, tulips, and cheese.
Agreed.
There's a depth and complexity to this nation
Yeah.
that deserves to be explored. Thank you for joining us on this journey.
And remember, there's always more to discover.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
All right. Looks like we're diving into Dutch literature today.
Yeah, centuries of it.
Wow. Awesome.
From way back when, all the way up to now.
So we'll be starting right at the beginning
Right at the beginning.
with the very first written Dutch.
The earliest we've got takes us to the 8th century.
8th century. Wow.
It's called the Utrechtse Doopjeloft,
Okay.
which basically means a baptismal vow.
Huh. Interesting that the first written Dutch would be something religious.
It really shows you how important religion was back then, tied in with literacy.
Makes sense.
Then, in the 10th century, we have the Wachtendonks Psalmen.
Psalms. Okay.
Unfortunately, the originals are lost.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, makes you wonder what they said exactly,
A
though.
little mystery there for us.
Right, but we at least know they existed, which is pretty cool.
Definitely. And now for something a little more well-known. I think
Okay.
Hebben Ola Vogala.
Ah, yes!
I've heard of that one.
It was long considered the very first piece of literary Dutch.
Not just like records and things.
Exactly, something more artistic, intentional.
But now
But now scholars are debating that.
makes you realize our knowledge is always evolving.
You think you know something, then bam, new evidence.
Keeps things interesting, though.
For sure. Always new things to learn.
Speaking of, for those who haven't heard it, Hebben Ola Vogala basically translates to have all the birds begun to nest except me and you.
Kind of a simple line, but it sparked a ton of discussion.
What do you think it means?
Well, I've always felt there's a kind of longing in it, like someone's left out.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, everyone else is paired up, but not them.
Right. It does have a melancholy sort of feeling.
Exactly.
So we're out of the ancient times now, heading into the medieval period.
That's where things get a bit more exciting.
More exciting. How so?
Well, we have knights and chivalry and courtly love, all that.
Ah, the classic medieval tales.
Exactly. We call them Ritter Romans, knightly romances.
Got it.
Heavily influenced by what was happening in France at the time.
So they weren't totally unique to the Netherlands,
Not in terms of themes and style, no.
but they were still popular, I bet.
Oh, hugely. People loved those stories of adventure and romance.
What are some of the big ones?
Carl and Elegast is one,
Yeah.
and Fergut as well.
So knights, quests, damsels, I assume.
All that good stuff. But there's another side to medieval Dutch literature.
Okay, what's that?
The mystics, the Middle Netherlands mystique.
Mystics, huh? So not just adventure stories.
Not at all. These writers were focused on spiritual stuff, very deep.
Interesting.
One of the most famous was Hadewich. She wrote in the Brabants dialect.
Okay.
Lots of imagery about divine love, that kind of thing.
Very different from knights and battles.
Definitely a different tone.
And speaking of Brabant,
Mm-hmm.
it was a pretty important place for literature back then.
It really was sort of a center of activity in the 14th and 15th centuries.
What kind of writers were coming out of there?
Well, there's Jacob van Maerlant, very prolific guy.
What did he write about?
Religious themes mainly, but made them accessible to everyday people.
So not just for scholars and priests and such.
Right, he wanted a wider audience.
Gotcha. What are some of his most famous works?
Rimjuvibel is one, and also Spiegel Historial.
So Bible stories, history, interest.
Gave people moral guidance, historical knowledge, too.
Cool. And I know there's one more big medieval work we got to mention.
Let me guess.
Van den Vos Reinherde,
The one and only.
the fox who outsmarts everyone.
Classic. It's satire, but so well done.
It's funny how animal stories can teach us about ourselves.
Right. Human nature never changes.
And it got translated into Latin, I heard.
It did. Super rare for a work in Dutch at that time.
Shows how popular it was.
Definitely a hit.
So from early religious writings to cunning foxes, we've seen quite a bit already.
And this is just the start. Imagine what comes next.
I can't wait to find out.
The Renaissance. Here we come.
Big changes ahead, right?
Oh, yeah. Huge shifts.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, those Rhetorikerskamers,
Uh-huh.
those rhetoric societies from medieval times,
Right.
they started to lose their grip.
Okay. Italian Renaissance humanism was coming in.
So a new way of thinking.
Totally. Focus on classical learning, reason.
Interesting. And how did that affect the literature?
It brought in fresh ideas, challenged the old ways.
Like a clash of styles almost?
You could say that. Some writers embraced it, others not so much.
I see. And what about this guy, Desiderius Erasmus?
He's an interesting case.
Because he wrote in Latin, mostly.
Right, not technically Dutch literature in the strict sense.
He was Dutch, right?
Oh yeah, born and raised.
So how do we reconcile that?
His impact was huge, even if not directly through his writing in Dutch.
How so?
His ideas on religion, ethics, they were really influential.
So even without reading him in the original, people were still affected.
Exactly. Translations, discussions, it all spread his thinking.
Wild how that works. Ideas transcending language.
It's the power of a good idea, I guess.
Okay, so Renaissance set the stage, but then the 17th century.
Ah, golden age.
That's the big one everyone talks about.
It really was a special time for Dutch literature.
Yeah.
What made it so great?
Well, you had the Dutch Republic, newly independent.
From Spain.
Yeah, and with that came economic prosperity.
People had money to spend, time to think.
Exactly, and that fostered a boom in creativity.
It's like all the right ingredients came together.
A recipe for artistic success.
And amidst this boom, who are some of the key players?
Well, Peter Cornelis Hooft, for one.
Okay, tell me about him.
A true Renaissance man, poet, playwright, historian, the whole package.
Wow, he got around.
He did, and did it well.
What are some of his famous works?
Granita is a good example, a pastoral play, very elegant.
Gotcha. And then there's the big one, Just en den Wandel.
Considered by many to be the greatest Dutch playwright.
I praise.
Deservedly so. His work was powerful, dealt with big themes,
Like what?
good and evil, free will. His play, Lucifer, really explores those ideas.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Really makes you think.
Sounds intense. I'm going to have to check it out.
You should. It's a classic.
And were there other poets besides those two?
Oh, tons. Jacob Katz, Constantine Huygens, Jacob Revius.
Give me the rundown.
Katz was known for his morals. Huygens for wit and satire. Revius was more religious.
So a nice variety there.
Absolutely, something for everyone.
It's amazing how much talent was packed into that one century.
It was a true golden age, but of course, things change.
Right, so what happened after?
Well, French classicism started to become popular.
Okay, so the pendulum swings back towards order and structure.
Exactly, emphasis on reason, clarity.
Makes sense after all the exuberance of the Golden Age.
People were looking for something different.
But wasn't this seen as a bit of a decline?
By some, yeah, they felt it was too imitative.
Not enough originality.
Right, but there were still cool things happening.
Like what?
New genres were emerging. The novel, for example.
Ah, so the start of something big.
And The Spectator, too.
Spectator, like a magazine or something.
Kinda. It was a periodical that offered social commentary.
Interesting. So people were thinking about the world around them.
Definitely. And we also have Betsy Wolfe and Aji Decken.
Who are they?
They wrote this epistolary novel, History von Mofrau's Sarah Burgerhardt.
Epistolary, so like through letters.
Exactly. Gives you a unique window into 18th century life.
I like that, a different perspective.
And it's interesting to see how Dutch literature was influenced by others.
Yeah, first French courtly love, then Italian humanism, now French classicism.
It's always been in dialogue with those broader European trends.
Like a give and take.
Absorbing ideas, but also making them their own.
That's what makes it so dynamic, I think.
And next up, we have another big shift.
Ooh, what's coming?
Romanticism. Get ready for some emotion.
Finally, some passion.
It's gonna be a wild ride.
The Tigers, they sound pretty radical.
They were real rebels shaking things up in the 1880s.
What did they like about the literature of the time?
It was too stuffy for them, too focused on morals and stuff.
They wanted something different.
Yeah, art for art's sake. That was their motto.
So just beauty, pure expression.
Exactly. No rules, no limits.
Yeah. I bet the older generation wasn't too happy about that.
You could say that. Lots of debates and arguments.
Makes sense. New ideas always challenge the old ones.
That's how progress happens, right? Pushing the boundaries.
Who were some of the big names in this movement?
Well, you had Willem Kloos, very influential critic.
Okay.
And Herman Gorder, amazing poet, experimented a lot with language.
Sounds like my kind of guy.
And Louis Couperus, although he wasn't officially part of the group.
Right, but his writing fit the style.
Absolutely. Very individualistic, focused on beauty and emotion.
So where did they publish all this stuff?
They had their own journal, De New Guides.
Another journal. They seem to pop up a lot.
It's where new ideas get shared. A platform for discussion and debate.
And it gives these movements a sense of identity, too.
Yeah, like a gathering place for like-minded artists.
So what happened after the Tigers? Did their influence fade?
Not really. They inspired a new generation, the Nguyen Tigers.
Okay, so they took those ideas and ran with them.
In a way, but they also shifted things a bit.
How so?
Less focus on the individual, more on community, social good.
Interesting, a more outward-looking approach.
Exactly. Figures like Albert Verwey, Henriette Roland Holst, they were key.
So art as a force for change, not just personal expression.
Right, a different emphasis.
And this is also when Van Nieuwenstrax started, right?
Yes, the first modern Flemish literary journal.
Bringing Flanders into the mix, very cool.
It broadened the scope of Dutch literature.
More voices, more perspectives.
And as we move into the 20th century, it gets even more diverse.
More movements, more experimentation.
Oh, yeah, neoclassicism, neo-romanticism, the avant-garde.
Lots of neos going on.
It's like they were looking back, but with a modern twist.
Reimagining the past for a new era.
Exactly. And then, of course, World War II happens.
A huge turning point for everything, literature included.
Absolutely. The Nazi occupation had a profound impact.
Censorship, oppression, I can't even imagine.
Many writers went silent. Some went into exile.
A dark time for creativity.
It was, but even in the darkest times, people find ways to express themselves.
So what came out of that experience?
Well, after the war, there's this movement called Onlustrend realism.
Disenchanting realism? That sounds pretty bleak.
It reflected the disillusionment and trauma of the war.
Writers like Gerard Rivy, Willem Frederik Hermans, they were key figures.
They didn't shy away from the difficult stuff, very honest, very raw.
A far cry from the romanticism of earlier times.
Definitely a more cynical, less idealistic view of the world.
But that makes sense, given what they'd been through.
You have to process those experiences somehow, and for them, writing was the way.
And amidst all this, did any new movements emerge?
Oh yeah, the human spirit is resilient, there's always creativity.
What did that look like?
Well, in the 1950s, you had the Vijf Tigers.
Okay, tell me about them.
Experimental poets, loved free verse, pushed the boundaries of language.
So another group of rule breakers.
You could say that they weren't afraid to try new things.
And that brings us pretty much up to the present.
Yeah, from there, we see the rise of multicultural literature.
More diverse voices, more perspectives.
Exactly, reflecting the changing demographics of the Netherlands.
It's been quite a journey from those early religious texts to where we are now.
Centuries of stories, poems, plays, all reflecting the Dutch experience.
I feel like I've learned so much, and yet there's still so much more to explore.
That's the beauty of it. There's always something new to discover.
So to our listeners, if you've enjoyed this deep dive, don't stop here.
Pick an author, a period, a theme that caught your interest, and keep digging.
There's a whole world of Dutch literature out there waiting to be explored.
And remember, every book is a window into another mind, another time.
It's a way to connect with the human experience across cultures and centuries.
Happy reading, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into the life and work of, well, a legend, Rembrandt.
Yeah, one of the true giants of art history.
We've got some fascinating excerpts from a Dutch Wikipedia article. And, I gotta say, Rembrandt's story, it's a lot more dramatic than you might think.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of twists and turns.
Our mission today is to go beyond the surface. We're looking for the man behind those masterpieces.
The real Rembrandt.
We're talking the mystery of his signature, his financial struggles, and how all of that impacted his art.
It all ties together, doesn't it?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Rembrandt was born in Leiden, Netherlands, sometime in 1606.
Or 1607. Even his birth year is a bit of a mystery.
That's right. Came from a middle-class family. Father was a miller. His mother's family were bakers.
Not exactly the typical artist background.
You'd think he'd be like, born into an art family or something. But no, miller, bakers.
But they recognized his talent early on. They sent him to Latin school, which was a pretty prestigious education at the time.
Oh, wow.
And they even enrolled him at Leiden University for a short while. Imagine, Rembrandt, the scholar.
I can't even picture that.
But clearly, his heart was set on painting. He left the university
Makes sense.
to pursue an apprenticeship,
Mm-hmm.
first with Jacob van Swanenburg, and then, really importantly, with Peter Lasman in Amsterdam.
Mm.
Lasman was a big deal, a renowned history painter.
Oh, yeah, that name's familiar.
And this apprenticeship, it really changed things for Rembrandt, exposed him to a whole new world of artistic possibilities.
That makes sense. So it was Lasman who really lit that artistic fire. Makes you wonder if he'd have become Rembrandt, if he'd stayed at that university.
Yeah, what if? It's a fascinating thought. And, there's this great story about Constantine Huygens, a super prominent guy in Dutch society, huge art lover.
Oh, yeah.
And he saw a young Rembrandt's work, and he was just blown away, praised his natural talent, that emotional depth, even compared Rembrandt to another artist, Jan Levens.
Okay.
Because said Rembrandt was just, superior.
Wow, high praise.
But what's even crazier, Huygens was shocked that neither of them, Rembrandt or Levens, felt the need to go to Italy to study the masters.
To Italy. But wasn't that like the thing to do for artists back then?
It was practically a rite of passage.
Yeah.
But they were like, nope, we're good here.
Wow, that's some serious confidence. They were basically saying, we can learn it all right here.
Exactly. They were bold, and you can see that boldness in Rembrandt's early work. He developed this distinctive style, favoring naturalism, those expressive figures, instead of what was popular in Italy at the time, all those idealized forms.
So he was already breaking the mold.
From the very beginning.
So he's this talented young artist making waves in Leiden, but the art world's big stage was calling, right? Amsterdam.
Absolutely. In 1631, he made the move to Amsterdam, bustling heart of the Dutch Golden Age.
The place to be.
He partnered up with an art dealer named Hendrik Eulenburg, who had all the right connections, wealthy patrons.
Eulenburg, wait a minute. Didn't we hear that name before? Wasn't that name connected to someone?
You're good. Hendrik was the uncle of Saskia Eulenburg, Rembrandt's future wife.
Ah, it's all coming together. But before we get into the romance, let's stick with his rise to fame in Amsterdam. What was that like?
Oh, it was meteoric. Portrait commissions from all the city's elite. His reputation just skyrocketed, incredible success, and just pure artistic exploration,
Wow. From a miller's son to the hottest artist in Amsterdam. Talk about living the dream.
He was. And then that dream got even better in 1634.
What happened then?
Two big things. He officially joined the Amsterdam Painters Guild, which, really solidified his status. And he married Saskia.
Saskia, the art dealer's niece.
A one and only.
So tell me about her. What was their relationship like? I mean, we know she came from a prominent family. Her father was a mayor. Was it love at first sight?
It seems like it. There's this wonderful drawing he did of her a year before they got married. She's got this adorable straw hat holding a flower. You can practically feel the love radiating from the page. Their early years together were full of it. Love, artistic passion, success. They had it all.
It sounds like a fairy tale.
It really does. But like all good stories, there were some plot twists coming their way. Challenges that would test their love and their resilience. But we'll have to save that for after a quick break.
Oh, cliffhanger. We'll be right back with more of Rembrandt's story. So when we left off, Rembrandt was living the high life, newly married to Saskia, successful, and oh yeah, they even bought a grand house in Amsterdam in 1639. Things were going pretty great for him.
Yeah, it seemed like it. But even with all that success, there were, some shadows lurking. Around this time, his art started to change.
How so?
Well, he kind of moved away from those super popular, profitable portraits, and he started focusing more on large-scale history paintings.
History paintings, I mean, weren't those considered like more highbrow than portraits? Trying to capture like these big epic events instead of just, a face?
Exactly. They were definitely seen as more prestigious, but they didn't exactly sell as well as those portraits did.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, this shift in his art kind of coincided with some devastating personal stuff.
Mm.
In 1641, Saskia gave birth to their son Titus, but just a year later, she died.
Oh, no.
Only a month after Rembrandt finished The Night Watch, one of his most famous pieces.
That's awful. Losing your wife so young with a newborn son to care for. I can't imagine the grief. Makes you wonder if maybe all that played a part in him wanting to paint those dramatic, larger-than-life history paintings, Like he needed that epic scale to deal with what he was going through.
It's an interesting thought. And then, to make things even more complicated, Saskia's will had a specific condition about Rembrandt's role as their son's guardian.
Oh, what was that?
If he remarried, he'd lose control of the money.
Wow. Talk about a tough situation. He was basically trapped between his personal life and his duty to his son.
Yeah, it really highlights those impossible choices he was dealing with back then. And speaking of The Night Watch, it's worth spending some time talking about that masterpiece, especially since it was finished right in the middle of all this turmoil.
Definitely. The Night Watch, it's one of those paintings everyone recognizes, even if they don't know a lot about art. All that action, the drama, it's more like a scene from a movie than, a boring old group portrait.
You got it. It was completely different from those typical group portraits that were so common back then. He was commissioned by the Kloveniersdollen, which is like this civic militia's shooting guild, to paint their group portrait. But instead of just, lining them all up, he created this dynamic, almost chironic scene, like they were about to spring into action.
And the lighting, so dramatic. It's probably why people call it the Night Watch, even though, well, we know now it's actually a daytime scene.
Yeah, that name came later, probably because the varnish got darker over time. Originally, he used light and shadow, that chiaroscuro technique he was known for, to create this amazing sense of movement and energy. You can almost hear the drums and the soldiers getting ready to march out.
It's like he took those stuffy group portraits and gave them life, added a whole story. Which makes sense, given what was going on in his own life at the time. So we've got the loss of Saskia, the will, and yet he's still creating these groundbreaking pieces. What happens next?
Well, as you can imagine, Rembrandt, he wasn't someone who liked to be alone. So he starts a relationship with Geertje Darks, who had been hired to help care for the young Titus.
Okay. And I'm guessing this is where things get a little messy.
Yeah, you could say that. The relationship with Geertje, it didn't end well. There were accusations, broken promises, legal battles, and she was eventually confined to a house of correction. It was a rough time for everyone involved.
I bet. All those accusations, they couldn't have been good for his reputation, especially so soon after Saskia's death.
Hard to say for sure, but it definitely couldn't have helped. And what's interesting is there's kind of a gap in his artistic output around this time. 1649, the year Geertje was confined, there aren't any dated paintings or etchings from him. Like his creativity went into hiding, just like he was dealing with all this upheaval in his personal life.
Grief, scandal, and his art takes a hit. Makes you wonder what would happen if things kept going that way.
For sure. But thankfully, for art lovers everywhere, this wasn't the end for Rembrandt. He wasn't going to let hardship break him. In fact, this is where another amazing woman comes into his life, Hendrickje Stoffels. She becomes his common-law wife and the model for a lot of his later paintings.
Hendrickje. There seems to be a pattern here. Strong, beautiful women inspiring some of his most powerful work.
You're onto something. Hendrickje was a constant in his life, a real source of support and love during a really tough time. And while their relationship raise some eyebrows back then. Remember, he couldn't officially marry her and keep Titus's inheritance safe. It seems like they had a genuine connection.
It's interesting how, even though the church wasn't happy about their situation, calling it living in sin, their love seemed to last.
It did. But he was still dealing with the restrictions from Saskia's will. And then, on top of everything, there were rumors about money problems starting to bubble up.
Ah, yeah, the grand house, his love for collecting art and all those curios.
Exactly. All that. Plus the fact that those history paintings weren't exactly bringing in the big bucks, it all caught up with him.
Classic tale, right? The artist who pours their heart into their work but struggles with everyday life. It's like genius and, well, being good with money don't always go together.
Unfortunately not. And in 1656 it happened. Rembrandt declared bankruptcy. Can you imagine? One of the greatest artists of his time, having to sell everything he owned, even his own art collection, just to pay his debts.
That's just heartbreaking. Losing everything you've worked for, seeing your passion literally sold off, must have been devastating.
It was a low point, for sure. But here's what's incredible about Rembrandt. He didn't let it destroy him. He kept the painting, even if it meant living a simpler life. And you know what? Some of his most powerful, most moving masterpieces were created during this time.
Wow, talk about resilience. He loses his wife, deals with scandal, goes bankrupt, and he never stops creating.
Exactly. And he wasn't alone. Hendrik G. and Titus, they had his back. They set up an art dealership, which was pretty clever. It helped them avoid the creditors and let Rembrandt keep working. Really shows the love and loyalty they had for him and his own, determination.
So even with all that hardship, his artistic fire kept burning. What a story. Before we get to the last chapter of his life, I'm curious about something we haven't touched on yet. His etchings.
Ah, yes. Rembrandt, he wasn't just a painter. He was a master etcher, too. His etchings, they were incredibly popular all over Europe, and his skill, it was just as impressive as his painting. There's this funny story from his early days about him and Jan Levens, the artist that, Constantine Huygens compared him to. Apparently, Rembrandt was so good at etching, he would rework and sell Levens' etchings as his own.
Wait, he was selling his friend's work? That's kind of mischievous. But I guess it shows how confident he was in his skills.
Absolutely. And that confidence, you can see it in every etching he made. He really pushed the boundaries of the technique, creating these super detailed, expressive works that captured, well, the whole spectrum of human emotion. But before we get too deep into the technical stuff, let's get back to his paintings and talk about how his style evolved over time.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about what makes a Rembrandt a Rembrandt.
Yeah.
What are we looking for when we see one of his paintings? What makes them so unique?
That's the question, isn't it? It's that mix of things that's hard to describe. But let's give it a shot. One thing that always gets me is his use of light and shadow. It's not just about making a realistic image. It's about using light to, shape those forms, to highlight details and leave other parts in darkness. It creates this incredible drama, this sense of mystery that pulls you in. It really is. It's like he's, directing your gaze, showing you what to focus on.
And then there's that thick paint, that
Yeah.
impasto, right?
Yeah.
It gives his paintings this incredible texture, like almost three-dimensional. It makes you want to reach out and touch it, see how it catches the light.
Exactly. And actually, speaking of science, recent research has actually looked at the chemical makeup of his impasto.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, it turns out Rembrandt used certain pigments like lead white and stuff
Hmm.
to create those textures and that luminosity. It wasn't just, randomly slapping on paint. It was really calculated. That's what gives his work that depth and richness.
So, he was a bit of a chemist, too?
Kind of, yeah. But there's also this amazing spontaneity to his work. He used all kinds of brushstrokes, sometimes bold and sweeping, sometimes really delicate. And then there's that Frodis technique, where he dragged the paint across the canvas.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
It creates these textured surfaces. Some people might even think they're unfinished. But for Rembrandt, it was all about getting the effect he wanted, even if it meant breaking the rules.
Yeah, he's daring us to look closer, to see past just the surface and, appreciate how the paint itself plays a role in the whole thing. This evolution of his style, did it have anything to do with what was happening in his life?
Oh, definitely. You can see his personal life reflected in how his work changes over time. Like early on, he was influenced by the Baroque period, all that drama, high contrast, intense emotions.
Feels like sense.
But as he got older, as he went through those losses, his work became more, introspective. He became more interested in those inner lives of his subjects, the simple beauty of everyday moments.
So he was putting his own experiences right there on the canvas.
You could say that. And then, in his later years, things changed again. The canvases got bigger, The colors richer, his brushstrokes even bolder. It was like he was rejecting the popular style at the time, all that polished, super detailed stuff. He embraced something more expressive, almost raw, that emphasized the emotions and humanity of his subjects.
Even after everything, he was still innovating. It's pretty inspiring. So we've talked about his life, the highs, the lows, the women he loved, and how his style developed. What about his legacy? What happened after he died?
Well, Rembrandt died in 1669, and sadly, he outlived both his son, Titus, and Hendrickje. He was buried in a rented grave in Amsterdam. It doesn't seem very fitting for an artist of his stature, does it? It's kind of ironic. He struggled financially his whole life, but he ended up becoming this national icon in the Netherlands.
It's a little tragic, kind of like a Shakespearean play, full of brilliance and heartbreak, victories and defeats. But ultimately, his art, it kind of transcended all that.
It really did. And his impact, it goes way beyond just the art world. Think about it. There have been movies, documentaries, even musicals about him. He still fascinates people centuries later.
He sure does. So, after our deep dive into Rembrandt's world, what's the image that sticks with you the most? The ambitious artist, the loving father, or just a flawed human being?
For me, it's his resilience. He never stopped creating, never stopped pushing those boundaries, even when life was at its worst. It's pretty amazing, It shows how powerful the human spirit can be, how we can find beauty and meaning no matter how dark things get.
I love that. And for all of you listening, if you could have a conversation with Rembrandt, what would you ask him? What mysteries would you try to unravel? More importantly, go see his art for yourself. Reading about it is one thing, but standing in front of one of his paintings, experiencing the power of his brush strokes firsthand, seeing how the light plays on the surface, that's the real deal. That's the ultimate deep dive. Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're all about Vincent van Gogh.
But the one and only.
Yeah, and we're going way beyond sunflowers.
Oh, yeah.
Like most people, I know the basics, but there's so much more to his story.
Right.
So we're diving into excerpts from a biographical text, originally in Dutch.
Wow, in Dutch.
Yeah, gives us a different perspective.
Yeah, that's cool.
So we're going to uncover some fascinating stuff about his life, early years, struggles, artistic turning points, the whole thing.
Sounds great.
So to kick things off, Vincent Willem van Gogh, born way back in 1853 in this tiny Dutch village called Zundert. Big family. His father was a pastor. Pretty traditional, right?
You'd think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But even early on, there are hints of the Van Gogh we know from the art. The text, it really highlights his connection to nature, which we see throughout his whole life.
Totally. Like those later cityscapes he's known for, those are such a contrast.
Yeah, huge contrast.
And it's so interesting how the text describes him kind of like a loner, finding peace in nature.
Right. It humanizes him. He's not just this tortured artist stereotype.
Exactly. It just shows the sensitivity in this search for meaning.
Yeah, you see that in his art, definitely.
Absolutely. And before he even went full on into art, he had all kinds of jobs. Art dealer, teacher, even a preacher.
Wow.
Like he was constantly searching.
It does make you think.
And of course, we can't talk about Van Gogh without mentioning his brother, Theo.
Oh, of course not. That relationship was huge.
So important. And those letters between them, pure gold.
Yeah, amazing insight into Vincent's thoughts, struggles, everything.
They were so close. Theo wasn't just a brother. He was like his confidant, champion, supporter, everything.
Yeah, emotionally, financially, the whole 9 yards.
But there's this period that really changed everything for him. The Borinage in Belgium.
Oh, the Borinage. It was a coal mining region. Super poor.
Brutal.
Yeah. He went there as a lay preacher, late 1870s, wanted to help the miners, lived in squalor right alongside them, experienced their hardship firsthand, totally changed him.
What a contrast. Those dark, gritty mines, and then bam, those incredible colors he becomes known for.
Yeah, it's wild. The text describes the miners. It says, feverish, tired, and emaciated.
Wow.
Faces etched with fatigue, aging before their time.
That must have been intense.
It shaped his whole outlook.
And this is where it all starts, right?
Yeah, his art, his drawing, get serious about it, learning anatomy, perspective, the whole thing. And he was 27 already.
A late bloomer.
Exactly. Imagine finding your true passion at 27.
That's encouraging for anyone who thinks they've missed the boat.
Right.
Sometimes hardship can lead to something amazing.
It's true. It kind of forces you to dig deep and find your voice.
Totally. And there's this story, it's kind of heartbreaking, about him and this famous artist, Jules Breton.
Oh, tell me this.
So Van Gogh, he goes all the way to Breton's house, drawings in hand, ready to show him, and then loses his nerve, turns back, almost like he wasn't ready for that kind of attention.
Yeah, that self-doubt, it was a constant struggle for him. But eventually that drive, it pulls him back home to the Netherlands.
Back to family, familiar landscapes.
Yeah, 1881 to 83.
But it's not exactly smooth sailing from there.
Not exactly. He had some tough relationships during that time. His family, the artist Anton Mauve, who was like a mentor to him, and especially Cian Horneck.
Cian, her story is just tragic.
It is.
She had such a difficult life, poverty, and their relationship, so complicated.
Very intense, very volatile.
And artistically.
Artistically, he's drawn to the Hague School.
Hague School.
They were all about depicting everyday life, especially laborers.
Yeah.
Really realistic style.
So he was trying to capture the overlooked, the everyday person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He had this social conscience. It wasn't just about pretty pictures. He wanted to tell their stories.
Powerful stuff.
Definitely. And that social conscience, it came straight from his time in the Bornage, seeing all that suffering up close.
It had to have had an impact.
For sure. And then he needs a change. So he heads to Drenthe and Nuenen.
Drenthe.
Yeah, 1883. It's like this rural escape for him. He writes about finding peace in the landscape, beauty, a real shift from the darkness of the Borinage.
Like a breath of fresh air.
Totally. Drenthe back then was vast, isolated, perfect for him.
He needed that space.
Yeah. And this is where he lived and worked in the Van Gogh house in New Amsterdam.
Isn't that the only place in the Netherlands where he both lived and worked that's still open to the public?
It is. Imagine walking through that space, seeing where he created.
That's gotta be powerful.
Yeah. But then it's back to Nuenen, back to his family. And sadly, his father passes away during that time.
Oh, wow.
And the art from this period, it's darker. Some of his most somber masterpieces. The Potato Eaters.
Oh, the Potato Eaters, such a powerful painting. It's so raw, so honest.
You can feel the weight of their lives, in those brushstrokes.
Absolutely.
It's far cry from Sunflowers or Starry Night, that's for sure.
But it's a crucial step in his journey.
Oh, totally. You could see his mastery developing. The light, the shadow, that unflinching look at humanity, all there.
And from there, he goes to Antwerp and then finally Paris.
Two huge cities, two completely different art scenes.
And both had a massive impact on him. But let's talk about Antwerp first. It was a quick but crazy time for him. What was he up to there?
Well, he goes to the Art Academy there in 1885.
Okay.
Clashes with the instructors, of course. But he also discovers something new. Japanese prints.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they blew him away.
Those prints are so vibrant, full of energy.
Totally. It was like a breath of fresh air for him.
Yeah.
Compared to that traditional European art he was used to.
Right.
And they had this huge impact on his style, especially his use of color and composition.
So, like, what kind of influence are we talking about?
Well, look at his later paintings, especially the landscapes. You'll see those flat planes of color, bold outlines, unusual perspectives, all that.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah. He loved how they used bold colors, simplified forms. It was all about movement and energy.
And that's all coming from a totally different culture.
Exactly. That's the magic of art,
Yeah.
It breaks down those barriers.
It's true.
And for Van Gogh, those Japanese prints, they opened up this whole new world of possibilities. He could finally break free from all those stuffy European conventions.
Find his own voice.
Exactly. Develop a more personal style, something really expressive.
And then it's off to Paris.
Paris, the heart of it all. Impressionism, post-impressionism, you name it.
This is where things really start to happen for him.
Oh, yeah. He's living with Theo, meeting everyone. Toulouse-Lautrec, Pissarro, Seurat.
Like a who's who of modern art.
Exactly. And he's soaking it all up. New techniques, brighter palettes, like a crash course in how to see the world differently.
He must have been like a sponge.
Absolutely. Always experimenting, evolving. But even surrounded by all these amazing artists, he still stood out.
He was different.
Yeah. Always pushing those boundaries, searching for new ways to express his vision.
Always pushing.
And that drive, it takes him to Arles and Sur-Mer, where he creates some of his most iconic work. But that's a story for our another deep dive.
So last time we left off with Van Gogh, he's in Arles, southern France.
Yeah, 1888. He's ready for a change.
Done with Paris.
Yeah, the hustle and bustle, the art scene. He needed something different. A new landscape, a place to really focus.
And that's where the Yellow House comes in.
The Yellow House, exactly.
It's iconic. You see it in so many of his paintings.
More than just a house, though. It was his dream studio.
He wanted to make it like an artist commune, right?
That was the plan. A place where artists could live, work together.
I can just imagine him there, filled with energy, painting those sunflower-filled rooms bathed in that golden light.
And for a while, it happened. Paul Gauguin joined him.
Oh, Gauguin. That relationship was intense, wasn't it?
It was. A lot of creative back and forth, but also a lot of tension. Their personalities, their artistic visions. It was a clash.
And of course, it all leads to the ear incident.
The ear. Probably the most famous and misunderstood part of his story.
Yeah, we have to talk about it.
It's important to approach it with sensitivity, though.
Hmm.
Mental illness, it played a big part in his life.
And there are so many theories about what actually happened.
Oh, endless theories. Some say it was an argument with Gauguin that got out of hand, maybe even physical.
Others say it was self-inflicted.
Right, a moment of extreme emotional distress.
And the text we're looking at, it doesn't give any definite answers, does it?
It doesn't. And that's part of the mystery. We may never know for sure.
But we do know he was struggling deeply.
Yeah. It's a reminder that there was a real person behind those incredible paintings.
With real problems. It's easy to romanticize it, but
the reality is he was brilliant, but he was also sick.
and yet, even with everything going on, his work in Arles, it's amazing. This is where Sunflowers and Starry Night come from.
It's incredible. Such turmoil, such personal suffering, and yet he creates some of the most vibrant, life-affirming art the world has ever seen.
Like he channeled it all into his painting.
The power of art, right. An outlet, a way to process emotions, find beauty in the darkness.
It almost seems impossible, doesn't it, that this period of such struggle was also his most productive.
It does. And the light in Arles, that intense southern French sun, it was like fuel for his creativity.
You can see it in his paintings, how he captures the light.
It's breathtaking, and sometimes a little unsettling.
And the colors, so vibrant, so alive.
He was using color like no one had before. It wasn't just about representing what he saw, it was about expressing what he felt.
Like Starry Night, those blues, those yellows, it's not just a night sky, it's this whole other feeling.
Exactly. Awe, wonder, this almost cosmic energy.
And then after the ear incident, he commits himself to a mental asylum.
Sorry.
It's so sad.
It is. But even there, he keeps painting.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Some of his most powerful landscapes are from Saint-Remy. The swirling skies, the cypress trees, so much emotion.
So he found a way to create even within those confines.
He did. And there's something else interesting that he does during this time.
What's that?
The text mentions he starts copying masterworks.
Copy.
Yeah, Rembrandt, Delacroix, artists he admired. Like he was trying to understand their techniques, find comfort in their work.
That's fascinating. It shows his dedication to learning, even when he was going through so much.
It does. And it reminds us that every artist, even the greats, they start somewhere. They study, they learn from those who came before.
Exactly. Makes him seem more human, like he
Yeah.
wasn't just this solitary genius. He needed that connection too.
He did.
And after a year in Saint-Remy, he leaves and moves closer to Theo,
To a Fesawai.
the final chapter.
It feels like a mix of hope and despair, doesn't it?
It does. Like, we know it's coming.
He was under the care of Dr. Cachet, a doctor who was also interested in art. The surroundings were peaceful. He seemed to find some peace there,
But there's still that feeling.
that something's not right.
Yeah.
But he's working. Those wheat fields, the crows, the skies, so much emotion in those paintings.
Like he was trying to capture everything.
His brushstrokes get looser, more expressive.
Yeah.
The colors, even bolder.
There's this urgency almost.
Like he knew his time was running out.
And tragically, it was. He takes his own life in Auvers-sur-Oise, July 27th, 1890.
Just 37 years old.
Such a devastating end to a life filled with so much passion, so much creativity, so much pain. It's tough, to see those paintings so full of life and then to know how much darkness he was carrying.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what if, right? What if he lived longer? Maybe found a way to deal with those demons.
It's a question that's been around for over a century.
It has. But even in his short life, he left such a mark.
He really did. He changed the way we see things. Color, light, even just the human experience.
Totally. And to think during his lifetime, he was practically unknown, sold just a handful of paintings.
And now he's this global icon.
It's true. A symbol of, well, genius, but also, unfortunately, of that struggle.
It's a reminder that success doesn't always come when you're alive.
Right. Sometimes the world takes a while to catch up.
I think with Van Gogh, it's his story that really draws people in, the struggles, the honesty in his work. It just resonates.
It does. We connect with that rawness, that search for meaning.
Absolutely. And the text mentions his sister-in-law, Johanna. She played a huge role after his death.
Oh yeah, Johanna van Gogh.
She kept his paintings, organized exhibitions, basically set the stage for his fame.
She did. Without her, who knows? His work might have been lost.
It's incredible. She believed in him when no one else did.
It's so important, to have people who support artists, who champion their work, even when it's not popular.
So true. And Van Gogh's influence, it goes way beyond just the art world, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. Think about it. Don McLean's Vincent,
Yeah?
the film Loving Vincent, all those immersive experiences.
He's everywhere, part of pop culture.
He is. It just shows you the power of his work. It goes beyond just pretty pictures. There's depth, there's emotion.
The connection that people still feel today.
Exactly.
So we've talked a lot about Van Gogh. His life, his work, his struggles, his impact. What do you think it all means?
I think it's a reminder that art has power. It can move us, challenge us, connect us to something bigger than ourselves.
Powerful stuff.
Van Gogh, even in his darkest moments, he searched for beauty, for meaning. And he shared that search with the world.
And we're still searching.
We are. If I could ask him one question, it would be, what brought you joy, Vincent?
What a beautiful question.
I think it's something we can all ask ourselves as we experience his work. What brings us joy?
What a great note to end on. And if you want to see some of the artwork we talked about or learn more about Van Gogh, we've got links in the show notes.
Yeah, check it out.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out the beauty around you.
Welcome to our deep dive on Desiderius Erasmus. You've sent us a fascinating stack of material, mostly from a Dutch biographical article.
Yeah.
And we're ready to unpack it all.
Yeah.
So we're going to explore not just WHO Erasmus was, but WHY. He still matters centuries later. What can we learn from this Renaissance thinker?
I think what's so captivating about Erasmus is his life story kind of reads like a novel, full of twists and turns.
Right.
Even his birth year is uncertain. 1466, 1467, and 1469 are all possibilities, with Rotterdam as the likely birthplace.
Yeah?
Although there is this curious note suggesting it might be Gouda.
Oh, wow. A mystery from the very beginning.
Right.
And speaking of mysteries, the article mentions that Erasmus was an illegitimate child. What exactly did that mean in the context of his time?
Well, imagine living with a label that could limit your prospects the moment you were born.
Yeah.
Defectus natalis, as they called it, carried serious social consequences in those days.
Oh.
It could impact your social standing, your career, even your inheritance rights.
It's remarkable that he accomplished so much, despite facing those societal barriers. I was surprised to learn that he received a papal dispensation around age 50 to address the implications of his birth. That seems rather late, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Receiving that dispensation, I think, speaks volumes about both Erasmus's stature and the power dynamics of the time.
Yeah.
By then, he was already a renowned scholar, and even the church recognized his intellectual contributions. It highlights how individuals could navigate and sometimes even overcome the rigid social structures of the era.
From a potentially disputed birthplace to overcoming societal hurdles,
Yeah.
it's clear that Erasmus's early life was anything but ordinary. His education seems to have played a pivotal role in shaping his path. Starting in Gouda and being influenced by humanism in Deventer. There's even mention of him fleeing the plague before continuing his studies in Augusta-Togenbosch.
Right.
Talk about a dramatic start.
That's quite a journey. And notice how humanism emerges as a recurring theme in his education.
This approach to learning, emphasizing classical texts and critical thinking, stands in stark contrast to the scholastic methods that dominated medieval education.
Yeah.
It was in these early years that the seeds for Erasmus's later intellectual pursuits were sown.
It sounds like this humanism was a major turning point in his development. Could you elaborate on what it was and why it was so significant?
Well, imagine a world where knowledge was largely confined to religious texts and theological debates. Humanism burst onto the scene, emphasizing the study of classical literature, history, and philosophy as a way to cultivate not only intellectual growth, but also moral virtue.
Right.
It was a shift from dogma and rote learning to reason and critical inquiry.
That sounds like a breath of fresh air in the academic world.
Yeah.
Then comes his time at the Emmaus Monastery, where he even penned writings like De Contemptu Mundi and Liber Antibarbarorum.
Right.
But it seems his relationship with monastic life was a bit complicated.
Yeah, a little bit.
Right. Yes, there was a tension between his admiration for the monastic ideal and his critique of its rigid rules. He grappled with this throughout his life, It reflects a key element of humanism, embracing faith while questioning dogma,
Yeah.
seeking knowledge from both classical and religious sources.
So he wasn't rejecting religion outright,
Right.
but rather seeking a more nuanced and informed approach to faith. This intellectual independence seems to follow him to Paris,
Right.
where he continues his studies but finds himself clashing with the scholastic methods of the Scotists.
Erasmus found himself drawn to the Parisian humanists, like Robert Gagin, who
Yeah.
shared his passion for classical learning and critical inquiry. It's also in Paris that he adopts Desiderius as a Latin counterpart to his Greek name Erasmios. This may seem like a small detail, but choosing a pen name was a significant act back then.
It's like choosing a stage name, right?
Exactly.
Even today, authors adopt pen names for various reasons: to create a distinct persona, to protect their privacy, or even to signal a break from the past.
Exactly. And in Erasmus's case, it reflects his evolving identity as a humanist scholar, crafting a new persona for himself on the intellectual stage of Europe.
This is also around the time his writing career takes off.
Right.
His collection of proverbs, Adagia, becomes a hit,
Huge hit.
especially with the rise of the printing press.
Yeah.
It's incredible how he seemed to embrace this new technology so effectively.
Adagia wasn't just a scholarly work.
Yeah.
It was witty, engaging, and accessible to a wide audience. Erasmus understood the power of the printing press to disseminate knowledge beyond the confines of universities and monasteries.
But even success didn't guarantee financial stability, did it? There's that anecdote about English customs officials confiscating his money.
Oh, yeah.
Really highlights the precarious life of a scholar at the time.
It does, it does. That incident reminds us that intellectual pursuits didn't always translate into material comfort.
Yeah.
Scholars like Erasmus often relied on the patronage of wealthy individuals or institutions, which could be unreliable and subject to political or economic whims. It's a sharp contrast to his burgeoning success as an author.
From pen names to proverbs, his story is full of intriguing details. But one work stands out as particularly impactful: The Praise of Folly.
Oh, yeah.
This satirical masterpiece takes on societal practices and hypocrisies head-on.
Satire can be a powerful tool for social commentary,
Yeah.
and Erasmus wielded it masterfully. By having Folly, a seemingly foolish figure, narrate the book, he was able to expose the absurdity of human behavior in a way that was both entertaining and thought-provoking.
It's a bit like a Renaissance-era roast, but with deeper implications.
Exactly. And it's a technique that still resonates today. Think about modern-day satirical shows
Yeah.
that use humor to critique politics, social norms, and even ourselves. They owe a debt to Erasmus and his masterful use of satire.
He certainly wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers, and he seems to have found himself in the right place at the right time. His friendships with notable figures like Thomas More, author of Utopia, and his interactions with young Henry VIII during his time in England placed him at the heart of intellectual ferment.
England at that time was a hotbed of new ideas and challenges to the established order. Erasmus's humanist ideals found fertile ground in this environment, influencing not just his writing, but also his interactions with some of the most powerful figures of his day.
Yeah.
It's amazing how he navigated these circles while staying true to his intellectual principles.
And speaking of navigating,
Yes.
we can't forget that fateful printing error that led him to Basel and the renowned printer, Johannes Froben.
Ah, yes.
It's as if destiny intervened to bring them together.
It really is. What seemed like a simple mishap turned into a pivotal moment in Erasmus's career.
Yeah.
His encounter with Froben resulted in a fruitful partnership and the publication of some of his most important works,
Yeah.
including his groundbreaking bilingual New Testament.
Hold on, a bilingual New Testament?
Yes.
That sounds like a bold move.
It was.
What was so revolutionary about that?
Well, think about it. At that time, the only authorized version of the Bible was the Latin Vulgate.
Yeah.
By publishing a Greek-Latin New Testament, Erasmus was essentially saying that people should be able to engage with Scripture in its original language,
Right.
not just rely on the church's interpretation.
It's like he was democratizing access to the Bible, empowering individuals to draw their own conclusions.
Right.
That must have caused quite a stir.
It was a direct challenge to the church's authority and a major catalyst for the Reformation that was brewing across Europe.
It's incredible how one accidental printing error could have such profound consequences.
Yeah.
But as we'll see, this was just the beginning of Erasmus's impact on the religious and intellectual landscape of his time.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Erasmus. It's amazing how one man's life can intersect with so many major historical events and ideas.
Yeah, it's true.
His story is like woven into the very fabric of the Renaissance and the Reformation.
Yeah.
Speaking of impactful events, publishing that bilingual New Testament was a game changer. It challenged the church's authority and paved the way for new interpretations of Scripture.
Absolutely. It was a bold move.
Yeah.
And it didn't come without controversy.
Right.
Erasmus faced pushback from those who saw the Latin Vulgate as the only legitimate version of the Bible. His critics in Leuven, for example, were quite vocal in their opposition.
I bet those academic debates got pretty heated.
I'm sure they did.
But Erasmus was never one to shy away from challenging conventional thinking.
No, you're right. He was a staunch advocate for intellectual freedom. He believed that knowledge shouldn't be confined to a select few, but should be accessible to all,
Right.
and that individuals should be free to engage with ideas and form their own opinions.
And this commitment to intellectual freedom also extended to his views on religious reform.
Yeah.
While he shared some common ground with Martin Luther, particularly in criticizing the excesses of the church, their approaches ultimately diverged.
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it?
Erasmus, the humanist scholar, believed in reasoned discourse and gradual change.
Yeah.
He saw the value in dialogue and compromise, seeking common ground amidst differences.
Luther, on the other hand, was a force of nature.
Yeah.
His fiery sermons and uncompromising stance shook the foundations of the church.
Exactly. He was driven by a profound sense of urgency, convinced that radical change was needed.
Yeah.
Unlike Erasmus,
Right.
he was willing to break with the church entirely, even if it meant upheaval and division.
It's almost as if they represented two sides of the same coin, both seeking reform, but with vastly different approaches.
Exactly.
And their differences weren't just about personality, were they? They also clashed on key theological issues,
Right.
most notably the debate on free will versus predestination.
That debate goes to the very heart of Christian theology and continues to be discussed even today.
Yeah.
Erasmus believed that humans have a choice in their salvation, that we exercise free will in accepting or rejecting God's grace. So he believed we have agency in our spiritual destiny.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Luther, on the other hand, emphasized the absolute sovereignty of God, arguing that our salvation is predetermined, a result of God's grace alone.
It sounds like they were grappling with fundamental questions about human agency, divine grace, and the nature of salvation.
Exactly.
And these are questions that continue to resonate with us today.
They do.
Even outside a strictly theological context, we grapple with ideas of choice, responsibility, and the forces that shape our lives.
It's interesting how these centuries-old debates still have relevance in our modern world.
Right.
Absolutely. They touch on universal human experiences and the search for meaning in our lives.
So where did Erasmus stand amidst this theological turmoil?
Well, remember, he valued moderation and dialogue. He wasn't afraid to challenge both sides, earning him the label of a man in the middle.
It seems like he was constantly walking a tightrope,
Yeah.
trying to find a path between opposing forces.
Yeah. He advocated for a more nuanced and tolerant approach to faith,
Right.
emphasizing love and understanding over dogma and division. This commitment to tolerance was woven into his writings, his scholarship, and his personal interactions.
We've talked about his tolerance in a religious context, but it seems like this was a broader principle for him, extending beyond just matters of faith.
That's right.
Yeah.
While his understanding of tolerance may have differed from our modern conception of individual liberties,
Yeah.
it was nonetheless a radical concept for his time.
Right.
He championed the idea of intellectual freedom, the ability to question, debate, and seek truth without fear of persecution.
His views on certain topics, like his opinions about Jewish people, were complex. He admired the humanist scholar Johannes Reuchlin,
Right.
who defended Jewish rights,
Yes.
but also expressed prejudices common to his era.
It's important to remember that even the most progressive thinkers of the past were products of their time. They may have held views that we find abhorrent today,
Yeah.
but recognizing these complexities doesn't diminish the importance of acknowledging the positive contributions of figures like Erasmus.
It's a reminder that history is full of nuance,
Yeah.
and that judging historical figures solely by contemporary standards can be a slippery slope.
Right.
We can learn from both their insights and their shortcomings.
Exactly. And in Erasmus's case, his advocacy for tolerance, even if imperfectly expressed, planted the seeds for later developments in human rights and intellectual freedom.
His legacy seems to transcend specific historical events.
It does. That's the power of ideas. They can ripple through time, influencing generations to come.
Yeah.
And Erasmus, despite the complexities and contradictions, was a wellspring of ideas that continue to shape our world today.
So, as we move into the final part of our deep dive, let's shift our focus from the historical context to the present.
Mm-hmm.
What are the lasting legacies of Erasmus? How do his ideas manifest in concrete ways in our world today?
That's a great question to consider as we delve into the final chapter of our Erasmus journey.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our Erasmus deep dive. And it's time to connect the dots. We've explored his life, his work, even some of his contradictions. But how does it all add up? What's the lasting legacy of this Renaissance rebel?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? It's easy to admire historical figures from a distance, but what makes Erasmus relevant today? How do his ideas live on in concrete ways?
Yeah.
Well, a good place to start is education. Remember, Erasmus wasn't just a scholar.
Right.
He was passionate about how do we learn?
Right. He wrote extensively about pedagogy, about structuring studies, even the proper pronunciation of Latin and Greek. It's easy to dismiss that as just being obsessed with dead languages.
Yeah.
But I sense there's more to it.
There is. For Erasmus, language was a tool, a key to unlocking the wisdom of the ancients.
Yeah.
He believed that by engaging with classical texts in their original languages, students could develop critical thinking skills, cultivate moral reasoning, and nurture a lifelong love of learning.
So it wasn't just about memorizing facts and figures.
Right.
It was about developing a certain mindset, a way of approaching knowledge and the world.
Exactly. And that emphasis on critical analysis, comparing sources and forming your own judgments, those are the foundations of humanistic education, which still influences our approaches today.
Right.
Think about how we encourage students to analyze literature, to evaluate different perspectives, to develop their own arguments. These are all echoes of Erasmus's ideas.
And beyond the classroom, his ideas about tolerance have had a profound impact on society. We talked about how his understanding of tolerance differed from our modern concept of individual liberties.
Right.
But he certainly planted the seeds for something incredibly important.
It's crucial to remember the context of Erasmus's time.
Yeah.
He lived in a world rife with religious conflict and persecution. His call for tolerance, for dialogue and understanding, was a radical departure from the prevailing attitudes of his era.
He wasn't advocating for everyone to agree, but rather to respect different viewpoints and engage in reasoned debate, even on the most contentious issues.
Precisely. That's the essence of intellectual freedom.
Yeah.
A cornerstone of open societies today.
Right.
We can draw a direct line from Erasmus's pleas for moderation and open discourse to the principles of free speech and religious liberty that we cherish in the modern world.
It's remarkable how these seemingly abstract ideas from centuries ago have had such a tangible impact on our world. It's a reminder that ideas have power.
Yeah.
They can shape individuals, influence movements, and ultimately transform societies.
And Erasmus's story is a testament to that enduring power. His legacy lives on not just in academic circles, but in the very fabric of our societies, in the way we approach education, discourse, and the freedom to think for ourselves.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Erasmus, what's the one thing we want our listeners to take away from this exploration?
I think it's this. Never underestimate the power of curiosity, critical thinking, and a willingness to engage with ideas, even those that challenge your own assumptions. Erasmus embodied these qualities, and his life is a testament to their enduring value.
Beautifully said. It's as if he's reaching across the centuries, encouraging us to embrace learning, to question dogma, and to strive for a more tolerant and understanding world.
Absolutely.
And perhaps, as his most famous work suggests, to find a bit of humor along the way.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this intellectual adventure. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Erasmus. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the spirit of the Renaissance alive.
Welcome to another deep dive. This time, it's the story of Anne Frank. And wow, you guys have given us a lot to work with.
Yeah, a ton of material, encyclopedia entries, biographies, even some of her writings that I bet a lot of people haven't heard of. Should be an interesting one.
For sure. I mean, most people, I think, know Anne Frank because of her diary, right?
Yeah.
But all this stuff you gave us, this paints a much wider picture of her life.
It really does. It's important to remember she was a real person.
Right. Not just this, like, symbol.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A girl with dreams, a family she loved. We can't forget that.
For sure. And by going beyond the diary, I think we can really understand how impactful her story is and, all the other lives that were affected by the Holocaust.
Definitely. It adds so much more depth.
So let's start at the beginning. Anne Frank was born in, was it Frankfurt?
Frankfurt, Germany, 1929.
1929, okay. And I was reading that encyclopedia entry you gave me, and it mentioned she loved ice skating.
It's hard to imagine, right?
Yeah, I know. Just like a normal kid, it makes it even more, I don't know, tragic or something, thinking about what happened to her later.
It does. That detail about her childhood really hits hard.
It does. But you know what else is tough to think about?
What's that?
Those early years in Germany. Imagine her growing up with, like, Nazi groups marching through the streets.
It's chilling to think about. They even had this song, something like, "When Jewish blood splatters from the knife, things will be good." Just awful.
Oh my gosh. Hearing that, it makes the whole atmosphere so real. All that fear they must have felt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it makes sense that her family wanted to get out, to escape to Amsterdam.
Right, and that's exactly what they did. Her dad, Otto, moved first in 1933. To escape the danger, for sure, but also because things were really tough financially for Jewish people in Germany at the time.
Oh, right. The economic crisis was hitting everyone hard then, but especially Jewish families, so he went to Amsterdam to start over.
Exactly.
But the rest of the family didn't go with him right away, huh?
No. It took some time. Her mom and her sister, Margot, they followed later that year. But Anne stayed behind for a little while longer. She didn't actually join them in Amsterdam until 1934.
So life in Amsterdam, I'm guessing, must have felt like such a relief compared to Germany.
I'm sure it was. For a while, at least.
Yeah. All the stuff you gave me about that time, the biographies, it all mentions her going to school, making friends, even little things like going to the beach. It seemed like they were trying to create a normal life for her.
They were.
Yeah.
And, it's important to remember that all the victims of the Holocaust, they were just normal people before all this.
Just living their lives.
Exactly. And Anne, she was a girl who loved to play, to learn, just like any other kid.
Right. But then, things changed again in 1938 with Kristallnacht.
The Night of Broken Glass.
Yeah.
It was a turning point. They were in Amsterdam by then, but the impact was still huge.
I bet.
Two of Anne's uncles, they actually managed to escape to the U.S. But then, sadly, her grandmother passed away in Amsterdam. So, it was this mix of relief and then more worry on top of everything else.
I can't imagine. But they kept going, kept building their lives.
They did. They were resilient.
But of course, the Nazis occupied the Netherlands just a couple of years later, 1940, and that changed everything for Jewish people.
Yeah, things got really bad really fast. Think about it. All of a sudden, no more movies, curfews everywhere, Jewish-owned businesses being targeted, and all the time, that threat of deportation hanging over them. It must have been terrifying.
It's crazy to think about. And it was right around this time that Anne got her diary, wasn't it?
Yeah, for her 13th birthday, that red checkered diary that everyone knows.
She started writing in it right away, almost like she knew she needed a place to, I don't know, process everything.
It became her outlet, her confidant. It's heartbreaking. I was reading one of her entries and she wrote, hold on. I hope I will be able to confide everything to you, as I have never been able to confide in anyone, and I hope you will be a great source of comfort and support.
She was just a kid.
I know, it just breaks your heart.
And just a few weeks after that, they had to go into hiding.
The situation in Amsterdam, it was just getting worse and worse. Deportations were happening all the time. And the Margot, Anne's older sister, she got a call-up notice, probably for forced labor.
That must have been the final straw.
It was. They knew they had to disappear.
So on July 6th, 1942, they went into hiding. The secret annex. Behind her dad's business.
Can you imagine making that decision, leaving everything behind? Their lives, their friends, their home.
It's almost impossible to imagine what that must have been like. Living in that tiny space, constantly afraid of being discovered.
It was cramped, dark, and isolating. Just a handful of people risking their own lives to bring them food and supplies.
People like Mipkis, those helpers, their courage is just incredible.
It really is. And you can see how much they meant to the people in hiding. Anne mentions them in her diary all the time.
Her diary really gives us a glimpse of what it was like living in the annex. All the tension, the lack of privacy, even the simple things, they became luxuries.
It's true. And even with all that, she managed to find moments of joy and humor.
It's amazing that she could do that. And, I was surprised to learn that she didn't just write in her diary.
Oh yeah, she wrote a lot.
I had no idea about the stories and essays.
It's another side of Anne that most people don't know about.
It makes you think, all that potential.
It does. It's really sad.
It is. So anyway, she wrote all this stuff while they were in hiding. But then, after more than 2 years, it all came crashing down.
The worst possible thing happened. August 4th, 1944, the annex was raided.
By the Nazis.
Yeah, the Sicherheitsdienst. They arrested the families, 2 of the helpers. Can you imagine the terror?
Yeah.
After all that time hiding?
I can't even imagine. And it was Miep Gies who found Anne's diary and kept it safe.
She did. Amazing.
So the families, where were they taken first?
Westerbork, a transit camp in the Netherlands. Another step on this horrible journey.
And then from Westerbork, they were sent to
Auschwitz, September 5th, 1944. It must have been. Just thinking about it, the fear they must have felt.
I know. Auschwitz was infamous. Everyone knew what happened there.
The men and women were separated right away. Otto Frank never saw his wife or daughters again.
Oh, that's just, I don't even have words.
Anne and Margot and their mom, Edith, they were sent to the women's camp at Birkenau. Terrible conditions, overcrowded, people starving, disease everywhere. It's almost impossible to imagine.
And then, to make things even worse, Anne and Margot were separated from their mother.
Yeah, they were sent to the Skades block for people with skin diseases.
It's just heartbreaking.
It is. And their mother, Edith, she died at Auschwitz in January of 45.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And then things get a little unclear with Anne and Margot. We know they were sent to Bergen-Belsen in October of 44 because things were so bad at Auschwitz. But the records from Bergen-Belsen are pretty scarce. We do know that the conditions were horrific.
So what do we know about their time at Bergen-Belsen? What happened to them?
Well, it was just awful there. Disease was everywhere, typhus especially. We don't know the exact date, but historians think both Anne and Margot died from typhus in February 1945, just a few weeks before the camp was liberated.
It's so sad.
It is.
And out of everyone who was hiding in the secret annex, only Otto Frank survived.
He went back to Amsterdam, but he lost everything. But he was determined to keep his daughter's memory alive.
And thanks to him and to Miep Gies, Anne's story has touched so many people.
Brilliance.
But we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to talk about.
Coming up, we'll talk about her legacy, what her story teaches us, and all those really difficult questions about how we remember her and what it means to share her story.
Yeah, it's important to think about.
It is. See you in a bit. It's really amazing to think about how many people have read Anne Frank's diary.
I know it's been translated into, over 70 languages?
Something like that, yeah. And millions of copies sold. But it's more than just a book.
Oh, definitely. It's become this symbol.
Of the Holocaust, yeah. But also just of humanity in general. Like we were talking about before, it's easy to get caught up in the big picture of history,
Yeah, the sheer scale of it.
But Anne's diary, it makes you remember that these were real people, real lives lost.
It personalizes it. You're not just reading about statistics.
Exactly. And it just makes the whole thing feel so much more real. You experience her hopes, her fears, her dreams.
And that's why I think her story is so powerful even all these years later. It's not just about the horrors of what happened, but also about the strength of the human spirit. Even in the middle of all that suffering, there's this will to live, to hope for better things.
And it's not just the diary that has that effect, I think. Her other writings, too, the stories, the essays.
Absolutely. They give us a deeper look at how her mind worked,
Yeah.
Even stuck in that tiny hiding place, she was so observant, so witty. You can tell she loved language.
And it's clear she wanted to be a writer.
Oh, yeah. She even says it in some of her entries.
It's just tragic that she never got to see any of her work published.
I know. It makes you think, what could she have accomplished if she had the chance? What stories would she have told?
We talked about that story, Caddie's Life, earlier. Her talent really shines in that one.
It does. It makes you wonder what else she was capable of.
It's really sad. But even though her life was cut short, her story has inspired so many people.
It's strange, isn't it, this paradox?
It is, yeah.
But there's something about her words, the way she wrote. They go beyond the darkness. There's this light there.
Yeah. And it's inspired a lot of people to stand up against injustice and prejudice, to try and make the world a better place.
Absolutely. Because it's a reminder of what can happen when we let hate take over.
When we forget to see each other as human beings.
Exactly. We have to fight against that.
Her story has also sparked conversations about remembering. documenting what happened, especially during times of conflict.
So important.
Like, personal stories can make history come alive in a way that textbooks just can't.
They give a voice to the people who are silenced. And Anne's diary is a perfect example of that.
But, there's been a lot of controversy, too, right? About how the diary has been published, adapted.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's tricky. Like, where's the line between historical significance and just, being respectful of her privacy?
It's a tough one. There have been arguments about editing the diary, for example. Some people say we have to respect her privacy even now. Others think the whole thing should be available, unedited.
It's hard because we don't know for sure if Anne ever wanted anyone else to read her words. I mean, the diary was written to Kitty, right? This imaginary friend.
That's right. But there is that one part where she talks about maybe publishing it after the war, so who knows?
Maybe she did want people to read it someday.
Maybe.
Which brings up another question. If she did want it published, is it right to share such personal things, even if she wanted it?
Tough question.
And then, it's not just the diary itself, right? There have been all these plays, movies, even graphic novels based on her story.
So many adaptations.
How do you make sure they're respectful? That they're not just exploiting her story?
I think it comes down to intention. Are they trying to educate people? To make them feel something? To really honor her memory? Or is it just about money?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And there are groups out there like the Anne Frank House that are really trying to do things right.
They're doing great work.
They're not afraid to talk about the tough stuff.
They want people to think critically, to really engage with the story.
It's not just about the facts.
It's about understanding what those facts mean.
And it's easy to forget that history isn't always clear-cut. There are so many gray areas.
Absolutely.
Like, even the people who helped the Frank family hide, those helpers, they weren't perfect. They were just normal people who made a choice.
A really brave choice.
And that shows that you don't have to be some kind of superhero to make a difference. It's the little things, the small acts of courage that can have a big impact.
Like ripples.
And Anne's story, it's like one of those ripples. It's touched so many people, even though she was just a girl when she wrote it.
And it keeps rippling outward to this day.
So, after talking about all this, what do you think Anne Frank's story teaches us about remembering? About holding on to those individual experiences?
It shows us that history isn't just a bunch of dates and names,
Yeah.
It's about people. And Anne's diary, it makes the Holocaust real. You can't ignore the personal tragedies when you read it.
Yeah, it brings it all home. So how do we use that, I guess? How do we use her story and all the horrible things that happened to fight against hate today?
Well, we have to start by recognizing the danger signs.
Yeah.
Right? The discrimination, the prejudice. And then we can't be silent. We have to speak out against it, challenge it wherever we see it.
We have to understand each other better.
Yeah, build those bridges and remember that this could all happen again if we're not careful.
Anne's story is definitely a wake-up call.
It is.
It's been a really powerful conversation. Thank you.
Of course.
I'm glad we could explore all this together. And for our listeners, if you want to keep learning, there's so much more to discover about Anne Frank beyond the diary.
Her other writings are really worth checking out.
They are. And the Anne Frank House online, they have tons of resources.
Lots of good stuff there.
This has been really eye-opening. Thank you again.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep learning. It's hard to talk about Anne Frank's story without thinking about all the ethical questions that come up.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider.
Especially with the diary. I mean, it's not just some historical document, right? It's a young girl's personal thoughts and feelings.
Very intimate.
So how do we balance that, the historical importance, with just being respectful of her privacy?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's been debated for years. How should we share it? Should it be edited? There are a lot of strong opinions out there.
It's tricky. Because, the diary itself was addressed to Kitty, her imaginary friend. It makes you wonder, did she ever want anyone else to read it?
That's a good point. It's impossible to know for sure what she would have wanted. But there is that passage where she talks about revising the diary, maybe publishing it after the war.
Right, so maybe she did think about a wider audience.
Maybe.
Which I guess just makes it even sadder, knowing that she didn't get that chance.
It does.
But it also makes those ethical questions even harder, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, even if she did want it published, is it our place to share such personal things?
It's a call.
And then you have all the adaptations, the plays, the movies, the graphic novels. It's not just about the diary anymore.
It's become this whole industry almost.
How do you make sure those adaptations are done right?
Yeah.
That they're not just, using her story for profit?
I think intention matters a lot. Are they trying to teach people something? create empathy? Or are they just trying to make money off a tragedy?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Thankfully, there are groups like the Anne Frank House that seem to be really conscious of these issues.
They are. They're doing some great work.
It's not shying away from the hard conversations.
No, they're not.
They want people to think critically.
And to see all the different sides of the issue.
It's not about simplifying things.
Right. It's about understanding the complexity.
And I think that's something we lose sight of sometimes when we talk about history.
It's easy to make it black and white, you know, good guys and bad guys. But it's rarely that simple.
Like, even the people who helped the Frank family, the helpers, they were just ordinary people who did an amazing thing.
Right. They weren't saints or anything. They were just people who made a choice.
And that's actually a really powerful message, I think.
It is.
You don't have to be some kind of superhero to make a difference.
You can make a difference in small ways. Everyday choices.
It's those little acts of courage that can change things.
That's like a ripple effect.
And Anne's story, it's like that, isn't it? This ripple that started with a young girl and her diary.
And it just keeps spreading.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. It's been really moving, and it's definitely made me think. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.
I'm glad we could do this together. And for everyone listening, we hope this has inspired you to learn more about Anne Frank and her story. It's more than just a history lesson. It's a call to action.
It is. We can all make choices that make the world a little bit better, even if they seem small.
Exactly. We can all choose hope, even in the face of darkness.
We can.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time, keep diving deep. All right, get ready, because today we're diving deep into the life of a figure whose name you've definitely heard before, but whose story might surprise you. William the Silent, father of the Dutch Republic. But, you know, as we're going to find out, the real story is way more complex than the legends suggest. You guys sent in an amazing collection of sources for this one, everything from like encyclopedias to like really deep historical analyses. So we are going to use all of that to try and unpack the truth behind this iconic figure.
You know, I think what's really captivating about William of Orange is that we often encounter him as this almost like mythical figurehead, but he was a real person, a man of flesh and blood who had to make incredibly difficult decisions. And he lived in a world of like shifting allegiances and serious religious turmoil.
Yeah, absolutely. And to fully grasp his story, I think we need to kind of rewind back to the 16th century. Europe at that time was on the brink of some massive religious change. And that's where we meet young William, born in Germany, raised Lutheran. But get this, converted to Catholicism at only 11 years old.
Yeah, it's all about a strategic maneuver for an inheritance. The Principality of Orange in France. To claim it, conversion was the price. It might seem like a simple transaction, but this inheritance came with a motto that would kind of define William's life. Je maintiendrai. I will maintain.
So he traded religion for land and a catchy motto. Talk about a power move. But, you know, this was a time of serious religious fervor, so how is this conversion viewed back then?
It's interesting because, you know, such conversions weren't totally unheard of among the nobility. Political strategy often trumped any kind of strict religious adherence. I think what's crucial, though, is how this early experience really molded William. He learned to adapt. He learned to make tough choices, to maintain what he deemed essential, even if it meant compromising on certain beliefs.
And that theme of maintaining, of holding on to ideals in the middle of chaos, that really does echo throughout his life, doesn't it? It's almost like this early experience kind of set the stage for his future as a leader.
Exactly. This champion of the Dutch revolt actually began his journey as a loyal servant to the powerful Spanish Habsburgs. He served Emperor Charles V himself.
We often forget that he wasn't just born a rebel leader, right? Like, he had to climb the ranks, and he even became a favorite of the emperor. By 23, he was a knight of the prestigious Order of the Golden Fleece. What did that signify back then?
So think of the Order of the Golden Fleece, like, I don't know, the most exclusive club for European nobility. Membership symbolized chivalry, piety, and this unwavering loyalty to the Habsburg dynasty. So being inducted was a remarkable honor, a real testament to William's, rising influence and potential. You see, it wasn't just about military prowess. Knights of the order were expected to be exemplary Christians and advisors to the emperor himself. So you can see how this experience, being around the elite, would have shaped William's understanding of power and leadership.
Right, so we have this young William, a knight, a diplomat, moving in these highest circles of power. And by 22, he's a military commander and advisor to King Philip II, Charles V's son, and William's future adversary.
This rapid ascent really speaks volumes about William's ambition and talent. He possessed this unique blend of charm, strategic thinking, and effectiveness. However, This also kind of lays the groundwork for future conflicts. As his power and responsibilities grew, any disagreements with Philip would carry much more weight.
And disagreements were brewing, right? Things weren't all sunshine and roses between William and Philip.
Yeah, cracks started to appear in their relationship, for sure. Tensions mounted over Philip's policies in the Netherlands, attempts to centralize power, heavy taxation, and, most significantly, his persecution of Protestants.
But wasn't William Catholic at this point? Why would he even object to the persecution of Protestants?
That's where things get really interesting. William's opposition wasn't solely based on religious zeal. He genuinely believed in individual liberty and the right to worship however you saw fit. He recognized the inherent dangers in Philip's policies, seeing them as harmful to the Netherlands, both morally and practically.
And then there's that, pivotal moment in 1564, William's Old Year's speech.
Ah, yes, a speech often overlooked, but incredibly significant. William advocated for freedom of conscience, for tolerance of different religious beliefs. And remember, he's still officially Catholic at this time.
Wow.
So this speech offers us a glimpse into William's evolving worldview, and it foreshadows his actions to come.
I can only imagine what the atmosphere was like in that room when he gave that speech. What were some of the key ideas he put forward?
There's one passage that stands out. It reads, "It is better to maintain peace and unity and allow people to live according to their conscience than to have discord and strife, in which even the victor loses more than he gains." These words, spoken by a man still officially Catholic, really reveal a deep commitment to religious freedom and a really prescient understanding of the dangers of religious intolerance. I think it's a sentiment that resonates even today, reminding us that unity and peace are often better served by respecting individual conscience than by enforcing conformity.
Wow. So the tension between William and Philip was definitely mounting. But when did this tension finally boil over? When did the loyal servant fully transform into the rebel leader?
The breaking point came in 1567. William, along with other nobles, was condemned by the Spanish and was forced to flee to Germany. It was a monumental turning point. He left behind his lands, his position, basically his entire life as he knew it.
And from exile, he starts to assemble an army. This marked the true beginning of the Dutch Revolt, right?
Exactly. And this raises, I think, a critical question that still resonates today. When is it justified to resist authority? And what are the personal risks involved? William, by choosing rebellion, was gambling everything. He became a symbol of resistance, but also a target.
So he's in exile, building an army, but he couldn't do it alone, right? He needed allies, but these allies often had totally different beliefs, goals. How did he navigate all that?
It was a delicate balancing act, for sure. He had to forge alliances with Dutch Calvinists, German Lutherans, even some dissatisfied Catholics. Managing these often, kind of fractious groups was a real testament to his political skill and his pragmatism. He understood that compromise was a necessary part of any revolution.
Yeah, but it wasn't always a clean fight, was it?
No, it rarely is.
Some of the sources mention that William sometimes turned a blind eye to atrocities committed by his supporters.
That's the complex reality of war and revolution, isn't it? Even those fighting for what they believe is a just cause can make difficult, sometimes morally questionable decisions. It's definitely something to think about. How do we reconcile the flaws of these historical figures with their achievements?
Yeah, a lot to consider there for sure. So William is in exile, building an army, making alliances. What were some of the key battles or turning points in those early years of the revolt?
Well, 1572 becomes a pivotal year. It's known as the Miracle Year because it begins with the capture of Den Briel by the Sea Beggars.
Hold on, Sea Beggars. That sounds like straight out of some pirate adventure.
Doesn't it? This group of exiled Dutch nobles and privateers operating under William's authority.
Wow, okay.
Their capture of Den Briel, though, which was a strategic port city, this was a huge victory for the rebels. It really ignited a wave of uprisings across the Netherlands. People were inspired by this, seemingly ragtag group defying the mighty Spanish Empire.
So a moment of triumph for William and the rebels, but 1572 also witnessed a much darker event, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France.
Right. 1572 brought victories, but it also brought devastating setbacks. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre was a horrific mass killing of Huguenots, French Protestants. William had hoped to gain their support, but this event shattered those hopes.
It's almost Shakespearean, isn't it? So much hope and so much violence all happening in the same year. And amidst all this turmoil, William's personal life was also unraveling. His second marriage wasn't exactly a fairy tale romance.
It wasn't. His marriage to Anne of Saxony did indeed implode. in scandal when she was found to be having an affair. It was a huge public humiliation for William.
I can only imagine all the gossip.
Remember, this is the 16th century. Powerful men did not stay single for long. Their marriages were often tools for forging political alliances.
Right. So what happened next?
Well, he quickly remarried, this time to Charlotte of Bourbon, another strategic alliance. This whole episode underscores the immense pressure that William was under, not just on the battlefield, but also just in maintaining a public image that could actually rally support for his cause.
Right. He was juggling like a million things. War, politics, all this personal drama. It's exhausting just thinking about it. But despite these challenges, he does achieve another major victory in 1576, the pacification of Ghent.
Yeah, this was a moment of incredible achievement. William somehow managed to unite all 17 provinces of the Netherlands against Spain. It was a dream come true. But as you might guess, it was short-lived.
Why did this unity fall apart? What happened?
Well, as with any revolution, there were internal divisions. The growing divide between the Catholic South and the Protestant North proved too difficult to bridge. Despite William's efforts, the dream of a united Netherlands began to crumble.
And this is where things get really dangerous for William.
Right.
He becomes like public enemy #1 for King Philip.
Absolutely. In 1580, Philip declared William an outlaw, placed a bounty on his head. Imagine the pressure. You're leading a rebellion, your dream of unity is falling apart. Now you're a hunted man.
It's amazing that he didn't just, give up and retire to a nice, peaceful monastery somewhere.
Well, I remember his motto, I will maintain. Giving up just wasn't in his nature. So instead, he pens his famous apology, defending his actions and solidifying his role as a symbol of Dutch resistance.
That's a bold move. It's like he's basically throwing down the gauntlet to Philip and saying, bring it on. What were some of the key arguments he made in the apology?
Well, in his apology, William really skillfully frames the conflict as one between tyranny and liberty. He argues that Philip had violated his oaths to uphold the traditional rights and freedoms of the Dutch people. He also addresses the issue of religious persecution, defending the right of individuals to worship according to their conscience. This document wasn't just a personal defense, though. It was a powerful piece of propaganda, aimed at rallying support for the Dutch cause, both domestically and internationally.
This defiance came at a cost, though, right? There were multiple assassination attempts on his life.
Yeah, sadly. The most chilling one occurred in 1582. William was shot at close range. The bullet actually lodged in his head. It's incredible that he even survived.
It makes you wonder how he kept going after facing that kind of danger. It's almost superhuman.
It speaks to his unwavering commitment to the cause, I think. But despite his resilience, the situation in the Netherlands continued to deteriorate. Desperate for allies, William makes what turned out to be fateful decision.
He turns to the Duke of Anjou, the brother of the French king. What was he hoping to achieve with this alliance?
He was hoping to secure some much-needed military and financial support against Spain. At the time, France was a major power, a rival of Spain, so it seemed like a logical move. However, the alliance proved to be a serious miscalculation.
It backfired spectacularly, didn't it? There was even an incident known as the French Fury in Antwerp.
Yeah, in 1583, Anjou's troops tried to seize control of Antwerp. It led to this bloody clash with the city's defenders. It was a complete disaster that further alienated the very people William was trying to unite.
So William's gamble fails, loses potential allies, and his position in the Netherlands becomes even more precarious. Amidst all this political turmoil, though, he finds time to get married again.
He does. In 1583, he marries Louise de Coligny, the daughter of the famed Huguenot leader Gaspard de Coligny. This one was considered to be a love match.
A glimmer of personal happiness amid the storm. But fate, it seems, had other plans. Wow, it really does feel like the story of William of Orange has it all. Political intrigue, religious conflict, personal tragedies, and, those fleeting moments of happiness. It's amazing that all of that can be packed into one lifetime.
And even with all that we've talked about, we've really only just scratched the surface. But before we wrap up our deep dive into William's life, there are a few more fascinating details that I think are worth mentioning.
Oh, I love the details. They really bring history to life. What do you got for us?
Well, remember how we discussed William inheriting the Principality of Orange and adopting the motto, Je maintiendrai? Well, it turns out that wasn't his only motto.
Wait, like he had a collection of mottos for different occasions?
Not exactly. But later in life, he actually expanded the motto to include a more, personal and religious dimension. It became Je maintiendrai l'honneur, la foi, la loi de Dieu, du roi de mes amis et moi, which translates to I will maintain the honor, the faith, the law of God, the king of my friends and myself.
Okay, that's a mouthful. It's definitely a step up from the simple "Je maintiendrai" of his youth. What do you think this expanded motto tells us about how he evolved over time?
It's a fascinating change, isn't it? I think it suggests a real deepening of his convictions, a commitment not just to maintaining his inheritance,
Mhm.
but to upholding these personal values and beliefs. And notice how he even includes loyalty to the king, even as he's leading a rebellion against the Spanish king.
It's a bit paradoxical. It makes you wonder, if he ever really saw himself as a rebel, or if he always kind of held out hope for some kind of reconciliation.
Yeah, that's a question historians continue to debate. Was William a pragmatist who used rebellion as a means to an end? Or was he a true believer in the cause of Dutch independence, willing to completely cut ties with the Spanish crown?
Right. It's like a choose your own adventure story. There's evidence to support both sides. But let's not forget, he had another motto too, right? Something about a kingfisher.
Yes. His personal motto was Saevis tranquillus in undis, which means calm in the midst of raging waves. And the symbol for this motto was a kingfisher, a bird known for its ability to remain steady, even in turbulent waters.
I love that imagery. It perfectly captures William's ability to navigate, those treacherous political waters of his time. He was always facing storms, but he always seemed to find a way to, maintain his composure, his focus, his strategic vision.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that even in the midst of chaos, it's possible to find that inner stillness and strength. And it's a quality that definitely contributed to William's success as a leader.
Okay, so we've talked about mottos, we've kind of explored his complex life, his legacy. But there's one more thing I'm curious about. We know William was buried in the Nieuwe Kerk in Delft, but his original plan was to be buried in Breda, wasn't it? What happened there?
Yeah, you're right. His initial wish was to be buried in Breda with his ancestors. But at the time of his death, Breda was still under Spanish control.
So they just decided it was too much trouble to move him once they recaptured Breda.
Well, I'm sure it was more complicated than that. But I do think there's a certain symbolism in William remaining in Delft. He became this national hero. And Delft, the city where he was assassinated, it became a site of pilgrimage for those who revered him.
Right, so his final resting place becomes the symbol of both the tragedy of his death and the triumph of his legacy.
Exactly. And his tomb in the Nieuwe Kerk, it was designed by this renowned architect Hendrik de Keyser. It's considered a masterpiece of Dutch Renaissance art. It's a fitting tribute to a man who played such a pivotal role in the birth of a nation.
We've certainly gone deep on this one, explored the life and legacy of William of Orange from his, privileged beginnings to his tumultuous rise as a rebel leader, his tragic assassination, and his enduring impact on history.
It's been quite the journey. What stands out to you most about William's story?
For me, it's his unwavering commitment to his ideals, even when those ideals seemed impossible to achieve. He faced constant setbacks, betrayals, threats on his life. Yet he never gave up on his vision for a free and independent Netherlands.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful takeaway. And it's something we can all learn from, no matter our background or beliefs. William's life is a testament to the human capacity for resilience, for courage, for believing in something greater than oneself.
So for our listener who's been on this journey with us, what would you suggest they explore next? How can they continue to delve into the world of William of Orange?
Well, there are countless books, articles, even historical novels that go deeper into specific aspects of his life and the Dutch Revolt. You could research the intricacies of the political landscape, the religious debates, the military strategies employed during the war, or, if you're feeling adventurous, you could even plan a trip to the Netherlands, visit Delft, see his tomb, walk the streets where he once walked.
Imagine standing in the Prinsenhof, where he was assassinated, or gazing at that grand tomb in the Nieuwe Kerk. History really comes alive when you can connect with those places, those tangible spots.
Absolutely. And remember, the most important thing is to keep questioning, keep exploring, keep learning. William of Orange's story is just one chapter in this grand narrative of human history, and there are countless others out there waiting to be discovered.
Well said. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue your own explorations of history. Until next time, keep diving.
Hey everyone, ready to go deep on a country that's a lot more than just windmills and tulips?
Sounds good.
Today we're doing a deep dive into the Netherlands. We've got a ton of sources to really explore this fascinating place. We're going way past the touristy stuff you usually hear about.
Definitely.
And we're going to get into the real nitty-gritty of Dutch history, their culture, and that unique spirit that makes them.
Yeah. What I always find so interesting about the Netherlands is how they can take these challenges and turn them into opportunities. I mean, Think about it. It's a country that's literally been shaped by water. A quarter of it is actually below sea level.
Oh, really?
But they've become like the world leaders in water management and sustainability.
Wow. That's pretty mind-boggling when you stop and think about it. You know what else is kind of mind-boggling?
Hmm.
The whole Holland versus the Netherlands thing. I've always wondered about that. Like, are they the same? Can you use them interchangeably? Or is there something more to it?
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing to be confused about. So Netherlands literally means lower countries,
Makes sense.
which, given its geography, is pretty fitting.
Yeah.
But Holland is actually only 2 of the 12 provinces
Oh, okay.
in North and South Holland. And they just happen to be the most powerful provinces during the Dutch Golden Age,
Ah, so the name just stuck.
basically.
Yeah, so it's kind of like calling the entire UK England.
Yeah, a good way to think about it.
Not really accurate. Maybe even a little insensitive to the other regions.
Right.
But how did these lower countries end up below sea level in the first place?
And that's where the story gets interesting. We're talking about centuries of battling the sea, pushing back against the tides.
Really?
The Dutch, they created this incredible system. It's called dikes. They're basically these huge seawalls. And then they have these things called polders.
What's that?
It's land that they reclaimed from the sea.
No way.
They literally pumped out the water and made it livable land.
That's amazing. But how did they even do that back then? I mean, was it all buckets and willpower?
Well, they had some help from those iconic windmills.
Of course.
But they weren't just there to look pretty. They were super important. They pump water out of the polders and ground grain. They even have this mind-blowing piece of engineering called the Delta Works.
What's that?
It's a series of dams and barriers.
Wow.
They were built after this devastating flood back in 1953.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's considered one of the 7 wonders of the modern world.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's a testament to human ingenuity right there.
Mm-hmm.
But with climate change and the rising sea levels, are those defenses still enough? It seems like the stakes are higher than ever.
That's the question, isn't it? The Dutch know about these challenges, and they've been working on new and innovative approaches, like this thing called Room for the River.
Room for the river.
Basically, instead of trying to control nature completely, they're giving the rivers more space to flood naturally in certain areas.
Oh, interesting.
This helps prevent massive damage in other places.
So they're thinking ahead.
Exactly.
It's like they're playing chess with nature.
That's a great way to put it. And that strategic thinking, that resilience, it's deeply ingrained in Dutch history. You know, before they were masters of water management, they had to fight for their survival, for their independence.
Oh, right. Let's rewind the clock a bit. The Netherlands has this long and complicated history, right? Romans, Franks, Burgundians, Habsburgs. It's a lot.
So many different influences. But I think the most important part of their story is when they fought against Spanish rule in the 16th century. It's called the 80 Years' War.
Ah, yes, the 80 Years' War. And that's where the Act of Abjuration comes in, right? Their Declaration of Independence.
Exactly. In 1581, they basically said, we're done with King Philip II of Spain. We're our own republic now.
Wow.
It was a bold move. And it started this long and bloody conflict.
This tiny nation standing up to a massive empire.
It's a real underdog story.
So I guess this is where the Dutch Golden Age comes in. Like, hey, we just won our independence. Let's become a global superpower.
It really is an incredible transformation. The Dutch Golden Age saw a huge explosion of trade, exploration, art, science, everything. They created the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch West India Company.
Those are big names.
They set up colonies and trading posts all over the world.
So from fighting for their lives to dominating global trade in just a few centuries, it's amazing how quickly things can change.
It really is. But like all golden ages, it eventually faded. There were struggles within the country, competition from other European powers. The Republic started to decline, which made way for Napoleon's influence. And finally, the Kingdom of the Netherlands was born in 1815.
And this new kingdom inherited a vast colonial empire. I know decolonization, particularly with Indonesia and Suriname, was a really complicated and often difficult process.
Decolonization always comes with its own set of challenges, but it's interesting how the Netherlands went from being colonial power to focusing on international cooperation and human rights. They've become active members of the UN, NATO, and the EU, which is a big change from their earlier neutrality.
It's like they've shifted from a more self-serving role on the world stage to a more collaborative one. And speaking of the modern Netherlands, I think it's time to bust some stereotypes. Because there's way more to this country than windmills and tulips, right?
Absolutely. Modern Netherlands is, it's a real innovator. especially in agriculture and sustainable practices.
Interesting.
They're like the world's second largest exporter of agricultural products after the U.S.
Whoa, that's huge, especially for a country their size.
It is.
It's like they figured out how to, I don't know, how to grow more with less, something we all could probably learn from.
Yeah.
I've also heard they're really big on cycling. Is that just a cliche, or is it really a way of life there?
Oh, no, it's definitely a way of life.
Really?
They have more bikes than people.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the infrastructure is amazing. They have special bike paths, bike traffic lights, everything to make cycling safe and easy.
That's so cool. I bet that makes a big difference for the environment and their health, right?
It does.
So, speaking of things that are good for you, let's talk about Dutch culture and their values. I've heard they're known for being very direct and tolerant and pragmatic, I think the word is. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it.
Okay.
I mean, the Dutch directness can be a bit much if you're not used to it.
I can see that.
But for them, it comes from honesty and efficiency. They believe in getting straight to the point, no sugarcoating.
I like that. No beating around the bush.
Exactly.
And their tolerance.
Yeah.
That's reflected in how they've always been open to people from different backgrounds and cultures. That's wonderful. What about the pragmatic thing? What does that actually look like in their everyday lives?
Well, they have the saying, "Doe maar gewoon, dan doe je algesving."
What does that mean?
It basically means just act normal, that's crazy enough.
I like that.
It perfectly sums up their whole approach to life. Practical, down to earth, not really caring about appearances.
That's so refreshing. It seems like that pragmatic way of thinking also shows up in their social policies. Like, they've been pioneers when it comes to legalized prostitution and euthanasia, haven't they?
They have.
Yeah.
The Dutch are known for their progressive views on social issues. They really believe in individual freedom. And they're not afraid to have open and honest conversations about difficult topics.
You know, maybe the rest of the world could learn a thing or two from that. All this talk about pragmatism and efficiency makes me think of another Dutch stereotype: their language skills. Is it really true that most Dutch people speak multiple languages?
It's totally true.
No way.
You'll find that almost everyone in the Netherlands speaks English really well.
Wow.
And a lot of people also speak German and French.
That's amazing.
It's partly because of their history as a trading nation, and also because they put a lot of emphasis on language education.
I'm always so impressed by that. It's like having this superpower, being able to connect with people from all over. But before we completely lose track, let's get back to their contributions to art and culture. I mean, some of the world's most famous painters are Dutch, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
When you think Dutch art, you think of those masters. Rembrandt, Vermeer, Van Gogh. Their work is so iconic, so recognizable.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just that they were amazing painters. They were pushing the boundaries. Like, the way Vermeer uses light and shadow is just incredible. No wonder his paintings are worth so much today.
Exactly. And then you have the incredible legacy of Anne Frank, whose diary, written while she was hiding from the Nazis during World War II, has become a symbol of hope and resilience.
Yeah, it's a really powerful story. It reminds us that the human spirit can endure even the darkest times.
So speaking of things that endure, let's talk about Dutch food. I gotta admit, I don't really know much beyond cheese and herring. What else is there?
Well, you got two of the staples right there. Gouda and Edam cheese are famous around the world.
And herring is a classic Dutch dish, often eaten raw with onions.
Oh, interesting.
But there's actually a lot more to Dutch cuisine. It's more diverse than you might think, with regional differences and influences from their colonial history.
So it's not all cheese and herring.
Not at all.
Okay, tell me more.
Like in the Northeast, they're known for their hearty food. You'll find dishes like stampot, which is a mashed potato dish with vegetables,
Sounds good.
and hutspot, a beef stew with carrots and onions.
Okay, I'd try that. What about other regions?
Well, the Western Netherlands is right by the sea,
Right.
so naturally they're known for their seafood.
Makes sense.
You can get fresh mussels, oysters, even eel.
Interesting. I'm guessing the dairy heartland is in the West too, right?
You got it.
Okay,
South Holland and North Holland are where those famous Gouda and Edam cheeses come from.
that's cool. What about the South? Anything unique about their food?
The South, especially the Limburg province, has a more, I guess you could say, refined culinary tradition. Because it's so close to France and Belgium, they're known for their pastries and savory pies and rich stews.
It's amazing how much variety they have packed into such a small country.
It really is. And that diversity goes beyond just food.
In what way?
You see it in everything. Their language, the architecture, their arts, their values. It's what makes the Netherlands such a fascinating place.
It's like they've managed to squeeze all this history, culture, and innovation into this small space.
And they've done it while holding on to their sense of community and social responsibility.
Yeah.
They really value cooperation and finding common ground.
And that's helped them in navigating the modern world.
Absolutely.
You know, it's inspiring. They face so many challenges, whether it's geography or political upheavals, and they always find a way to not just survive, but thrive.
And they've managed to stay true to their core values throughout it all.
What are those again?
Pragmatism, tolerance, a love of freedom, and a deep respect for nature.
I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty inspired right now. I think it's time we turn the conversation over to our listeners. We've covered so much today: their awesome water management, progressive social policies, that vibrant art scene. But I'm sure we've just scratched the surface. There must be tons of other cool stuff about Dutch culture and history, right?
Definitely. I mean, we could talk for hours about their architecture or science and technology contributions, their love of speed skating, or there's a political system.
So much to discover.
Yeah.
So, listener, we want to hear from you. What about Dutch society or history really caught your attention? What would you like to learn more about?
Maybe you're curious about the Dutch East India Company's impact on global trade, or perhaps you're interested in how they approach sustainable urban planning. Whatever it is, let us know in the comments.
We love hearing what you think. It keeps the conversation going. And that's what the deep dive is all about: sparking your curiosity, getting you to dig deeper, helping you become a more informed and engaged citizen of the world.
Remember, this is just the beginning. There's a whole world of knowledge out there.
So keep diving deep, keep asking questions, and keep learning. Who knows? Maybe you'll end up cycling through Amsterdam someday, checking out those canals and windmills, experiencing the magic of the Netherlands for yourself.
Until next time, happy exploring.
All right, let's dive into the world of these two Dutch masters,
Yeah.
Rembrandt and Van Gogh.
Yeah.
You've given us excerpts from their Wikipedia pages, and we're going to try to uncover some surprising connections between these iconic artists,
Okay.
separated by centuries, yet united by this passion for capturing the human experience.
Yeah.
It's fascinating
That is fascinating.
how, despite the vast difference in their eras, they both ended up taking these unconventional paths to become the icons that we know today.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what would their lives have been like if they had stayed on those initial paths? Can you imagine Rembrandt, the son of a miller, spending his days poring over books instead of canvases?
It's almost impossible to picture.
Right.
But yet, that early scholarly influence might have played a role in shaping his artistic journey.
Uh-huh.
If you think about his early work,
Yeah.
those detailed pieces from his Leiden period, there's a meticulousness there.
Right.
Almost a scientific precision in the way that he captures light and texture that hints at that early intellectual training.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's like those early years laid a foundation for the incredible detail and realism that he'd later become known for.
Yeah.
But then you have Van Gogh,
Right.
who really embodies this idea of a self-made artist.
Absolutely.
He goes from exploring all these different careers to completely immersing himself in art.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that his connection to nature heavily influenced his work.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you think about his paintings from his time in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
those dark, somber tones, those depictions of peasant life,
Uh-huh.
all rooted in the landscapes and people of his homeland.
Yeah.
It's like he was trying to make sense of the world around him,
Yeah.
the struggles and resilience of everyday people through his art.
And it's so interesting how both artists, despite their completely different backgrounds, approaches, they ended up pushing the boundaries of artistic expression in their respective times.
Right. They weren't afraid to break the mold
Yeah.
to challenge the conventions of their day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about their artistic influences.
Okay.
Rembrandt, he was the absolute master of light and shadow.
Yes.
That chiaroscuro technique,
Yeah.
the way he illuminates his subjects with those dramatic beams of light, it's just instantly recognizable.
It is, yeah.
And his style evolves so much over time.
Yeah, we see a clear shift
Right.
from the meticulous detail of those early Leiden paintings to the bolder, more expressive style of his later years.
Yeah.
But throughout his career,
Yeah.
there's this consistent fascination with capturing the inner lives of his subjects, their emotions, their humanity,
Uh-huh.
all through that masterful use of light.
It's like he's peeling back the layers,
Yeah,
revealing something deeper beneath the surface.
exactly.
And then you have Van Gogh, who takes this idea of expressing emotion through art to a whole other level.
Absolutely. His evolution from the dark, somber palette of his Dutch period to the vibrant, almost explosive colors of his time in France is just remarkable.
Yeah.
He was clearly influenced by the Impressionists,
Yeah.
but he took their ideas about color and light and amplified them, creating these canvases that practically pulsate with energy and emotion.
Yeah, it's really,
Yeah.
I think that's where we see a key connection between these two artists.
Yeah.
This deep desire to portray human emotion and experience,
Right.
but through such distinct styles.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think fueled that shared ambition?
I think it speaks to a fundamental aspect of what it means to be an artist.
Oh, yeah.
This urge to connect with others, to share their own experiences and perceptions,
Yeah.
to make sense of the world around them through their art. And both Rembrandt and Van Gogh did that
Yes.
in ways that continue to resonate with us centuries later.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, we can't talk about these two artists without delving into their self-portraits,
Right.
which are practically their own genres of art.
Yes.
Rembrandt created over 100 self-portraits throughout his lifetime.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's almost like he was documenting his own life, his aging, his changing emotions, all through these incredibly detailed portrayals.
There's a real sense of self-exploration in Rembrandt's self-portraits.
Oh, yeah.
He's not afraid to show himself warts and all, to depict the passage of time, the joys and sorrows of life, all with incredible honesty.
And he even went a step further by using costumes and poses to depict himself as historical or biblical figures.
Right.
It's almost like he was trying on different identities,
Yeah.
exploring these different facets of himself through these roles.
Exactly.
And then you have Van Gogh's self-portraits,
Yeah.
which, while fewer in number, are equally powerful in their own way.
Yes, they are.
They're raw, unflinching, and often deeply moving.
They are.
Yeah. They really allow us to see into his soul,
Yeah.
don't they? To witness his struggles with mental health, his artistic experimentation, all laid bare on those canvases.
And there's a vulnerability there, an honesty that's both captivating and heartbreaking.
It's so interesting to see how both artists used self-portraiture for such different purposes. Rembrandt using it as this tool for self-exploration,
Right.
almost like a visual diary of his life and artistic evolution. And Van Gogh using it as a way to express his inner turmoil, his struggles, his search for identity.
Yeah, it's a testament to the power of self-portraiture as an art form.
Yeah.
A way for artists to grapple with their own identities, to confront their inner and outer worlds, and to share those experiences with the world.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yes.
How two artists can approach the same genre with such different intentions and yet create works that are equally impactful.
Yeah.
It speaks to the multifaceted nature of art itself.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things that makes the study of art history so compelling.
Yeah.
You're constantly discovering new connections.
Right.
New perspectives, new ways of seeing the world through the eyes of these masters.
Speaking of masterpieces, let's shift our focus to two paintings that need no introduction.
Okay.
Rembrandt's The Night Watch and Van Gogh's Sunflowers.
Ah, yes. The Night Watch. A painting that truly broke all the rules.
It did.
It's a monumental group portrait,
Yes.
but instead of the stiff, formal arrangements
Right.
that were typical of the genre at the time,
Uh-huh.
Rembrandt captured a dynamic scene.
Yeah.
Full of movement and life.
It's like he froze a moment in time,
Yes.
capturing the energy and excitement of this militia company getting ready for action.
Uh-huh.
He uses light and shadow so masterfully to create this sense of depth and drama,
Right.
drawing our attention to the key figures and creating a narrative within the painting itself.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
He took a traditional genre and completely reinvented it.
Right.
Injecting it with a sense of dynamism and realism that was unprecedented at the time.
And then you have Van Gogh's Sunflower, a series of paintings that have become synonymous with his name.
Yes.
Those vibrant yellows,
Yes.
those thick, expressive brushstrokes.
Uh-huh.
They're instantly recognizable.
Absolutely.
It's incredible how he took a simple subject, like a sunflower,
Yeah.
and transformed it into such a powerful and enduring image.
And it wasn't just about capturing the visual beauty of the sunflowers.
Right.
He was also expressing something deeper.
Yeah.
The energy of life, the power of nature, the intensity of his own emotions, all channeled through those brushstrokes and colors.
Both of these paintings, in their own way,
Yeah.
showcase the artist's willingness to experiment, to push the boundaries of what art could be.
They were both innovators,
Yeah.
visionaries who weren't afraid to challenge conventions and create something truly unique and unforgettable.
Okay, so we've talked about their artistic journeys,
Uh-huh.
their styles, their
Yeah.
self-portraits,
Yeah.
and even touched on some of their most famous works.
Right.
But let's get real for a second.
Yep.
Both Rembrandt and Van Gogh, despite their incredible talents and success, face their fair share of personal challenges.
Yes, their lives were far from idyllic.
Yeah.
Both of them experienced financial struggles, strained relationships, and emotional turmoil.
Right.
But it's important to remember that these challenges, however difficult, were also part of what shaped them as artists.
It's almost like their art becomes even more meaningful when you understand the context of their lives.
Absolutely.
The struggles they endured, the triumphs that they achieved.
It adds a layer of depth and complexity to their work,
Yeah.
allowing us to connect with them on a more human level.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much more to explore.
Yeah.
Stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into the fascinating worlds of Rembrandt and Van Gogh.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
It's really incredible how, even amidst those challenges, their dedication to their craft never wavered.
Yeah.
Like, their art provided them with this sense of purpose, an outlet for their emotions, and a way to connect with the world. That's a great point. Like, it wasn't just a profession, it was a lifeline.
Right.
Speaking of dedication to craft, let's talk about Rembrandt's mastery of etching.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't just a painter, he was an incredible printmaker.
It's true, his etchings are often overlooked,
Yeah, they are.
but they're just as masterful as his paintings.
Yeah.
He had this incredible ability to create these rich, velvety textures using a technique called dry point.
Oh, wow.
It's like he was drawing with light, creating these subtle variations in tone and depth that are simply mesmerizing.
And think about the impact of printmaking back then.
Right.
It allowed Rembrandt to reach a much wider audience.
Exactly.
He was like the 17th century version of going viral.
It's true. And it's a testament to his skill as a printmaker that his etchings are still so highly sought after today.
Yeah.
They offer us a glimpse into his creative process, his experimentation with different techniques, and his ability to capture the essence of his subjects with just a few lines and strokes.
And let's not forget that both artists had a real knack for capturing the intricacies of human anatomy. Think about Rembrandt's iconic painting, The Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Nicholas Tulp. It's a masterpiece of observation and composition.
It is.
He doesn't shy away from the details, but he also elevates the scene,
Yeah.
creating this sense of drama and scientific curiosity that draws you in.
The way he arranges the figures,
Right.
the expressions on their faces, the subtle gestures, it's like you're right there in the room with them, witnessing this moment of discovery.
And Van Gogh, even though he was largely self-taught, also had a deep understanding of the human form.
Right.
We see it in his drawings and paintings of laborers, peasants, those everyday people that he was so drawn to. It's like he saw their dignity, their humanity, and he wanted to capture that essence through his art.
And he used color to express not just their physicality,
Yeah.
but their emotional states as well.
Right.
The way he applies those thick, swirling brushstrokes,
Yeah.
loaded with vibrant colors, it's like he's painting emotions onto the canvas.
Oh, yeah.
You can practically feel the weariness of the potato eaters, the resilience of the field workers, the inner strength of those who toiled day in and day out.
Like you said before, he was painting with emotion.
Yes.
Speaking of painting with emotion,
Okay.
both artists had this fascination with portraying specific types of people.
Right.
Rembrandt with his biblical figures
Yeah.
and those portraits of Amsterdam's elite,
Mm-hmm.
and Van Gogh with his focus on the working class,
Yeah.
the miners, the
Yeah.
peasants,
Yes.
those who were often overlooked by society.
It's a reflection of their worlds, their own experiences, and their artistic choices.
Yeah.
Rembrandt capturing the opulence and grandeur of the Dutch Golden Age,
Uh-huh.
and Van Gogh drawn to the struggles and humanity of those living on the margins.
And through their art, they bring these different worlds to life,
Yes.
allowing us to step back in time and experience those eras through their eyes. It's like they're giving us these glimpses into these different social strata,
Yeah.
but always with a focus on the human story at the heart of it all.
And those stories continue to resonate with us today.
They do.
We see the influence of Rembrandt and Van Gogh everywhere,
Everywhere, yeah.
in the work of countless artists who followed in their footsteps,
Mm-hmm.
in museums and galleries around the world, and even in popular culture.
It's true. Their impact on the art world is undeniable.
Absolutely.
Rembrandt, with his studio full of pupils
Yeah.
who carried on his techniques and styles,
Right.
ensuring that his artistic lineage continued long after his death.
And Van Gogh, while he didn't have a formal studio, his influence on subsequent generations of artists is immeasurable.
Yeah, it really is.
The Expressionists, the Fauvists, they all owe a debt to his bold use of color and his expressive brushwork.
It's like he opened up this whole new way of seeing and painting,
Yeah.
a way of expressing emotions through color and form that had a profound impact on the trajectory of modern art.
And it's not just the art world that's been influenced by these masters. Their lives and works have become part of our collective cultural consciousness.
Yeah.
We see Rembrandt's name on everything from hotels to chocolates.
I know, it's crazy.
And Van Gogh, well, he's practically a household name.
Yeah.
From that catchy Don McLean song, Vincent,
Oh, yeah.
to countless films and documentaries, his story and his art continue to capture the popular imagination.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because their lives and their art touch on something universal.
Yeah.
They remind us of the beauty and fragility of life, the power of individual expression, and the enduring human spirit that perseveres even in the face of adversity.
And maybe, just maybe, their art offers us a sense of solace,
Yeah.
a connection to something bigger than ourselves in a world that can often feel chaotic and overwhelming.
It's a thought-provoking idea,
Yeah.
and as we continue to explore their works, we might discover even more layers of meaning and relevance to our own lives.
You know, looking back at their journeys,
Yeah.
one can't help but wonder about the challenges and the triumphs that they experienced.
Uh-huh.
Rembrandt achieving early fame and fortune only to face financial ruin and declining popularity later in life.
And Van Gogh battling inner demons and societal rejection only to achieve posthumous recognition that sadly eluded him during his lifetime.
Their stories remind us that the path of an artist is rarely a smooth one.
It's true.
It's paved with both moments of brilliance and periods of immense struggle.
But ultimately, it's the art that endures.
Yeah.
The legacy that they leave behind that transcends the ups and downs of their personal lives.
And I think it's important to note that both Rembrandt and Van Gogh left behind a wealth of material for us to explore.
Absolutely.
Their paintings, drawings, etchings, and letters.
Yes, these primary sources offer us invaluable insights into their thoughts, their processes, and the artistic landscapes that they inhabited.
It's like we're given this incredible opportunity to step back in time
Yes.
and connect with these masters on a more personal level to understand their motivations and their creative genius.
And as we immerse ourselves in their works, we might even find ourselves questioning our own perceptions of art, beauty, and the world around us.
Speaking of questioning perceptions,
Okay.
let's dive into a few specific aspects of their lives that often spark debate and intrigue.
Okay.
Rembrandt's financial woes, for example, have been the subject of much speculation.
Some attribute it to extravagant spending habits, others to changing artistic tastes and a decline in commissions.
Yeah.
There's even a theory that his involvement in art dealing played a role.
It's like a financial mystery wrapped in an artistic enigma.
It is.
And Van Gogh's mental health, a topic that continues to fascinate and fuel discussions about the link between creativity and mental illness.
It's a sensitive and complex issue.
Uh-huh.
And while we can't diagnose him with certainty centuries later,
Right.
we can see the evidence of his struggles in his letters and his art.
But what's important is that we approach these topics with respect and understanding, recognizing that these were real people with complex lives beyond the brushstrokes and canvases.
Absolutely. Our goal should be to gain a deeper understanding of their lives and their works while acknowledging the limitations of historical interpretation.
Now let's take a closer look at some of the technical aspects of their art,
Okay.
particularly the use of color.
Yeah.
Rembrandt, known for his mastery of chiaroscuro, that dramatic interplay of light and shadow.
Yes.
Take a look at any of his portraits and you'll see how he uses darkness to sculpt and define his subjects, to create mood and drama.
And his palette often consisted of earthy tones,
Yeah.
rich browns and luminous golds. It's a restrained palette, but incredibly effective in conveying emotion and depth.
And then you have Van Gogh, who embraced color in a way that was truly revolutionary.
Right.
He moved away from the more muted tones of his early works
Yeah.
and embraced this vibrant palette of yellows, blues, and greens, often applying paint thickly, creating texture and movement with his brushstrokes.
Yeah, even his darker paintings have this underlying vibrancy that draws you in.
It's like he's using color to express the very essence of life.
Yes.
The energy,
Yeah.
the passion, the raw emotions that he experienced so intensely.
Exactly.
Fascinating to see how each artist used color to achieve different effects.
Uh-huh.
Rembrandt's use of light and shadow to evoke mood and drama, and Van Gogh's use of vibrant hues to express emotion and energy.
Right.
It's like two sides of the same coin, both exploring the power of color in such unique and impactful ways.
And it's worth noting that both artists were influenced by the artistic trends of their respective eras.
Of course.
Rembrandt was influenced by the Baroque period's emphasis on drama and movement,
Uh-huh.
while Van Gogh was inspired by the Impressionist focus on capturing light and fleeting moments.
Yeah.
But taking those ideas even further with his bold use of color and expressive brushwork.
It's a testament to their artistic genius that they were able to absorb these influences and transform them into something uniquely their own.
It's this blend of innovation and tradition that makes their work so compelling.
Yeah.
They were masters of their craft,
Mhm.
constantly experimenting and pushing the boundaries of what art could be.
Yeah.
And they weren't afraid to learn from those who came before them,
Right.
to take those influences and make them their own.
It's like they were standing on the shoulders of giants,
Yes.
but they were also forging their own path,
Mhm.
creating something entirely new and groundbreaking.
Exactly.
And their self-portraits are a perfect example of this.
Uh-huh.
Rembrandt, with his prolific output,
Yeah.
capturing his own image throughout his life,
Right.
showcasing his evolution as an artist and offering glimpses into his changing moods and appearance.
It's like he's inviting us into his personal journey,
Yeah.
allowing us to witness his transformation as both an artist and a human being.
And those self-portraits aren't just straightforward representations.
No.
He often depicted himself in elaborate costumes and poses.